Boop 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 boop. We're gonna stream right now. Yes, we are. We're gonna stream right now. Yes, we are. We're gonna stream right now. Yes, we are. We're gonna stream right now. Hey, that guy, how are you doing? How you doing, that guy? Oh man, I had one of these days where I woke up in kind of like a dead brain state, and I every Wednesday I go down and I get half price wings at the usual place, and then I walk down to the beach, right, and I try to sit on the beach and have like a nice meditative moment on the beach. That's really what I'm trying to do, is have a nice little meditative moment on the beach. But it was so windy today and it was so cold. It was just like blasting at me and blasting at me. But I sat on the beach anyway because I like to kind of connect with nature, and I like to have that moment where I just let myself kind of go and I exist just in this natural space. And to exist in the natural space when it's so full of cacophony, when it's so large scale, when it's so extra, is a speaking of extra, I've got my little pug here and he is all about the love right now. Yes, he is. Isn't that right, Milo? Isn't that right? But it really reminded me, first of all, it took a lot out of me just because of the natural force of it, just the wind and the cold and all of that. But also, like, there was a comforting moment that I had, I think, where I realized that, sometimes you're just in a storm, right? Sometimes you're just in a storm, and you're in a storm, and life is going to throw storms at you. But it's all okay, It's all going to calm down, and it's all going to kind of it's all going to figure itself out in the end. And yeah, your wife describes the experience as centering. Yeah, that's a good way of talking about it, centering, where you're just kind of finding the middle of yourself and finding the core of yourself and realizing what really matters in life, right? Realizing what really matters in life. Hail Tosis on Twitch, good to see you. That things might seem outrageous, but they're temporary, right? That the world and the natural world that we live in will always be here. My little guy is just losing his little mind. Isn't that right, Milo? I've been noticing with him, he just gets like super, super hyper right before he goes to sleep. He gets like super, super hyper, and then finally when he realizes no more treats, it's not going to happen, right? Then he's just like, okay, and then he just goes to sleep. We have a fellow named Charmar Regiment on Twitch. What do you mean by Western civilization when you say its decline is happening? Well, there's certainly a decline of the West generally that is occurring, right? That the West came in, especially in the West. What we're very specifically talking about is what the United States discusses when it says the international world community, right? The international world community, as far as the West is concerned, the United States is concerned, is the United States, Canada, Europe, and Australia. Those are what are thought of as the Western nation or the Western world or the international world community, as the United States sort of describes it. And this force, this idea of the international world community and the West really has been crystallized. It really took form, but it really crystallized in World War II. And this organization, this construct of the West, has been essentially leading the world in a hegemony since World War II. And that force, that international community, is in a serious state of decline. And that serious state of decline is visible all over the place. I mean, first of all, you've got the rising fascism all throughout. You could point to the Netherlands just is about to elect a far right leader. The Italians elected a far right leader. The Brits are basically led by a banker right now. Donald Trump is going to be reelected throughout the United States. You have, and then on top of that, you've just got the reduction in living standards all across the Western world that's occurring. The decline of the dollar. The decline of the dollar as the world currency, as the world reserve currency, is going to be the moment, if you ask me, that the average citizen is not going to understand what's happening as it happens, I think, but they're going to experience many negative outcomes from the decline of the dollar. And what do I mean by the decline of the dollar? And why does that matter so much? Well, the decline of the dollar. So after World War II, the United States basically created an institution, and there was an institution created called the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank that said to the entire rest of the world, if you want to trade internationally, you must trade in United States dollars. If you want to trade oil specifically, right, what's called the petrodollar, then you have to trade in dollars. And if you don't trade in dollars, we will literally invade you. We will coup your government. We will destroy you. We will make life hard for you. We will sanction you. We will embargo you. We will destroy you. And they have, and they've done for decades now, in order to prop up this, in order to prop up what this single currency, this dollar hegemony. And what this has allowed the United States to do is it has allowed them to essentially say to the entire rest of the world, we are going to ship all of our manufacturing to you, which they did. They shipped all the manufacturing over to China and India and throughout Southeast Asia. We're going to ship all of our manufacturing over to you, and you are going to work for us and create all our goods for us while we give you dollars. So we essentially create nothing of value whatsoever. We just print money out of thin air because money is nothing. And we give them dollars in exchange for actual goods. Well, what this has done, of course, is it's sold the means of production to people who literally were saying, seize the means of production. So instead of seizing them, they traded for them. And now places like China especially, has increased the quality of life and the standard of living for its own citizens and the means of their own industrial production to such a degree that they are now being seen by the rest of the world as the more stable partner. This is the threat. That as time has moved forward, the United States has really revealed itself to be erratic, untrustworthy, and psychotic. It doesn't do what it says it's going to do. It doesn't follow its own laws. It doesn't follow its own treaties. Everything is just opportunism for the United States. And so most of the world's population is now beginning to form new trade relations with specifically China, but there are other organizations as well, South Africa, Russia, India. This creates what's colloquially called the BRICS. Now, BRICS is not actually like an official organization, but it's just a method by which Westerners have come to understand that there is a loose series of trade agreements between these countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, BRICS. And what this is doing is that it means that these countries are beginning to trade with one another off of the dollar, right? And if you have most of the world's population trading off the dollar, when the entire arrangement that the Americans have is to trade with that the entire rest of the world must trade on the dollar in exchange for nothing, right? That the United States just gives you dollars and you do all the work while we do nothing of value. Well, the game is up, right? And what that means and what that's going to do is that America is going to look out into the world and it's going to say, hey, we'd like to buy some goods. Here's our dollars. And the world is going to say, we don't want your dollars. Your dollars don't have any value. They don't. What do you? And then finally, the rest of the world is going to say, "What is it you make? What is it you do? What good, what service do you provide for us to actually exchange?" And the United States is going to say, "Well, we know how to make bombs, and we know how to go to war. We don't know how to win a war, but we know how to go to war. So that's what we do." And the rest of the world is going to say, "Okay, we're not buying." So the value of the dollar is going to plummet, and it's going to happen pretty swiftly. There's going to be a tipping point moment where suddenly all of the nations of the world all at once will recognize this, and there'll just be a run, and it'll just go. The decline has already begun. There's already been a turning point. The value of the dollar has deflated slightly, but it's going to go, and it's going to happen very quickly. And what this means for, like, I'll give you a really clear example of something that could happen, right? And again, this is a could. I'm not a prophet, right? I'm not a god or anything, but this is something that could occur. And if it's not this specific commodity, it'll be a commodity like this. Coffee. America does not make one bean of coffee. All of the coffee that America drinks is imported. It's imported from Brazil, it's imported from Colombia, it's imported from Ethiopia and Kenya. That we don't make any coffee whatsoever because we can't. We don't have the climate for it. We literally cannot make coffee. Meanwhile, America is the number one drinker of coffee. The second being Brazil, one of the major producers of coffee, Brazil. And so now we might actually look at a situation where the price of coffee is going to skyrocket. Why? Because what we've been doing is we've been trading dollars for coffee. And the Brazilians and the Kenyans and the Ethiopians and the Colombians might very well turn to us and be like, "Yeah, we don't want dollars anymore. We don't want your dollars. We want goods and services. We want assets. We want something that's going to improve the quality of the life for our own citizens. And we're not getting that from you any longer." And so the price of coffee might very well skyrocket. And suddenly something that you have taken for complete granted, literally every corner has a coffee shop on it, right? Suddenly now that might become a more difficult to get luxury good because the value of the dollar has plummeted and we have soiled our trade relations with the countries that are responsible for producing it. And more importantly than anything else I've said is that there are other markets that have grown and are suddenly interested in purchasing. India, China. These places have a population of 1.5 billion people each. America's got a population of 350 million, right? Doesn't take a genius to figure out that if the Chinese suddenly get a taste for coffee, which way the market's going to turn. Right? Yeah, and coffee is a luxury good, but right now it's cheap. Right now it's cheap because for the longest time we've been the ones that have really been buying it. Well, what if the Chinese get a taste for it? And wars have been fought over tea before. So there is something that could happen and that could be noticeable in your life, and it could occur really soon. Really soon. Yeah, good to see you, Corey, June, Baked Potato. Good to see you all. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. So, Charmar, I hope that explains sort of my position and what I see happening on the horizon, because that is more or less, and nothing about this is prognostication, right? That this is how empires fall, that this is how it actually goes, that the institutions that empires build up begin to decay. Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that, Charmar. If you have any other questions or anything, or more importantly, Charmar, if you want to challenge my position, please, because I would like to, I want to be correct. I want to be accurate. I don't want to have an ideology. I want to be right. And so if you think that I'm not being accurate, then you can go ahead and challenge this position. But I hope that things I'm saying make sense, because as we move into the future, as we go from where we are now into the future, I know that my life has been a series of looking about 5 years ahead and saying, things are going to get weird 5 years, and saying to everybody around me, this is what's going to happen about 5 years about, right? You can't be specific, but you can kind of give general sort of things. And everybody waves their hands at me, and that's always how it's been. Everyone kind of waves their hands at me, and especially when I was a teenager, people would just be like, John, like, what are you talking about? Like, there's like there's going to be a rising fascism. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we elected Obama. Come on, what are you talking about? Racism's over, John. What are you talking about? Right? And it wasn't until Donald Trump got elected. When Donald Trump got elected, all of the sort of naysayers started to turn to me and say, like, so, John, hey, what do you think about what's happening? Right? I started to gain a little bit more credibility in the eyes of my peers, because the things that I had always been saying seemed to begin manifesting in front of their eyes in ways that were undeniable. I mean, if you were paying attention to the Obama administration, it was always undeniable. The man destroyed Libya. The drone program was as bad for the black population as Bush was. Like, I don't know where this idea came from that Obama was this like staunch liberal that was helping everybody. But that was what the idea was. But Donald Trump showing up basically was the moment when everybody went, oh, wait a minute. Things are not so stable. Things are not so normal. Like, oh, the people who have been warning, the canaries in the coal mines, the people who have been ringing the bell the entire time, maybe we should start actually listening. If this country is going to shit out Donald Trump, if Donald Trump is going to become the president, then yeah, it's time to maybe sit up a little straighter, and it's time to actually listen in. And ever since then, I've been calling it how I've been seeing it, and I've been right. So, yeah, fascism ended when we elected Joe Biden. That's right, June. The moment we elected Joe Biden, that's right. The new FDR, he came in and he fixed everything for us. That's right. And don't forget, history started October 7th, right? October 7th. Corey says, I'll add that the U.S. also has a stronghold on the software industry, but that is an easily challenged control. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that China cares so much about like the software industry. It seems to me like their focus is on research and development in terms of like places like quantum computing. Like if China can get ahead in terms of hardware, the software will follow, right? Like and if China is controlling large scale industries in terms of chip production, in terms of industries like into smartphones and all of this, like they're going to control the nature of what happens in the future. Like that's really the truth. And like the honest to God truth is like America likes to produce basically just entertainment, right? Just faffy sort of garbage for us to sort of play for the 2 hours we have every evening before we have to go to sleep, right? Like that's more or less like the bread and circuses. Like we're not really taking true advantage of the technology that we have. Like really, when you think about the technology we have, like we could create amazing pieces of work that would actually challenge people's perception of what it is to be a human and what it is to be alive in the world. Like we could really create true existential explorations of reality and the nature of our existences, and truly challenge people who have sort of the rudimentary positions of our reduced thinking, right? Of just my experience is the experience, and I'm the player character, and everybody else is an NPC, and all that kind of thing. We could be actively making high-level pieces of art in order to challenge our minds in major ways, and basically we're just playing Call of Duty, you know, like really, like we're basically just playing Call of Duty, and it's like. You take a look at what Call of Duty is, And I mean, it makes sense that there would be a Call of Duty. I'm not saying that people should not play a game like Call of Duty, but like, it's basically pick up a gun and shoot a guy you don't know, right? And then teabag him and shit on him for it. Like, that's essentially what it is. And that's the most played video game franchise right now on the internet. Like, that's where we are. Like, that's where we are. And that's the sort of sadness. Aaron, what's wrong with Trump? He's merely a representation of populist sentiment. No, I tend to agree with you that he is a representation of populist sentiment, but that's the problem. like he represents chaos. He represents a chaos that's being introduced into the system. That people want stability. Okay, like this is really, really what's important. Like, especially if you are a place like Bangladesh, right? Like, if you're a place that has an international trading partner named the United States, and you're looking from outside the United States into the United States, you want a place that is stable. You want a stable trading partner. That's what you want. You want to know what they're going to do. You want to know what they're going to do is they're going to follow through with what they say, right? And Donald Trump represents chaos. And he represents chaos because he essentially represents himself. That he doesn't actually care about anyone else other than himself. That his appearance on the stage itself was quite chaotic and unexpected. And then the way he acted on the world stage was quite chaotic and unexpected. I also think that if you're a Muslim nation, like, he enacted a Muslim ban. He wasn't exactly nice to the Muslim communities in America. There's all the evidence that you could possibly want that he panders. At the very least, he panders to fascists in America. There's a lot of good people on both sides, is a famous quote. To the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. Right, that kind of thing. MAGA itself, Make America Great Again, is a echo of a Ku Klux Klan slogan, Make America Great. So so he has all of these tendrils and all of these connections, and I think it's accurate to say that Donald Trump himself is not a fascist because Donald Trump himself has no principles. Right? And that by itself is dangerous. It's dangerous to have anybody in a position of power when they have no principles. That such a person is opportunistic. They are going to do what they want to do in order to secure power for themselves. And so you can't predict them. And that makes them the most dangerous of leaders. It means that you don't necessarily want to trade with them. It means that you don't necessarily want to get into agreements with them. It means that you don't want to move forward with them in a official capacity. It also means it also represents, like, Donald Trump's appearance in the society definitely represents the moment when the society began to openly be at war with itself. Like, previously, there was always a conflict, obviously. There's always been a conflict, but that there had been this kind of sense of stability throughout it, culturally, right? Like, the appearance of Obama on the world stage somewhat signaled to the world and gave hope to the world and gave hope to America that things were going to stabilize and that we were going to head towards normalization. I never believed this. But it had that kind of a quality culturally to it. And then Donald Trump's appearance basically took a hammer and smashed that all to pieces. And then, and now since then we have gone down into the chaos sphere. Like, now you've got figures like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro, becoming popular figures throughout America. And these guys are open Nazis. Like, these guys are like Matt Walsh calls himself a theocratic fascist, for God's sakes. And they're starting to make movies, for Christ's sake. Like, I mean, it's unreal. And so Donald Trump is chaos, and that's what he represents, chaos. And he's not, and nobody wants to see chaos. Like, you don't want the people who have control of military forces and nuclear bombs to be chaos. Populist sentiment, says Charmar. Populist sentiment, it's also well known that Hitler was also supported by a populist sentiment. And then Aaron goes, okay, and? Yeah, I mean, you might want to think about that. Like, no sentiment is for everyone's good. What's your point? Can't please 100% of people. Well, also, Aaron, I think, like, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you're a Donald Trump supporter. Is that accurate? Why don't you just tell me what your position on Donald Trump is so that I can actually give you the clearest possible answer I can give you that will actually resonate with you, I think, the best. I don't want to just talk to nothing. Like, are you like a Donald Trump supporter, or are you a person who just kind of understands where Donald Trump comes from and why he exists? So give me a clearer sense. You say, I do not support Trump at all, but I completely support the modern populist movement. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that the modern populist movement makes all the sense in the world. People are mad. That's all. Like, people are mad. They don't know who to be mad at. They don't know what to be mad at. All they know is that things have gone wrong, and they know things have gone wrong. Right? And so it makes sense that you're going to end up with far-right populist figures because those far-right populist figures get funding. Like, Donald Trump's original campaign was funded by Peter Thiel. Right? Amongst other people. Just like Hitler was funded by capitalist industrialists, so too will other far-right people. Because the far-right understands that there is a looming threat, a real, actual looming threat of communism and leftism that can come and remove their power. Right? And they know this is happening. That's why you're starting to see here in Ontario, you're starting to see Stephen Lech, standing up for Canadian values. This is the quote-unquote education minister. Starting 2025, grade 10 students will learn about communism's painful role in human history by mandating learning on the Holodomor's famine. We're also investigating $400K to fund a mobile classroom so kids learn to never be bystanders in the face of evil. Also, we're standing up for Canadian values. Proud to announce all students will learn about the Holodomor and the brutal consequences of extreme political ideologies like communism or Marxism. Ensuring the next generation embraces democracy and freedom and never sits on the sidelines in the face of evil. And then, of course, he ends the tweet with hashtag Slava Ukraini, a Nazi slogan. So we are seeing far-right fascism rise up in our country pretty clearly. And the goal of far-right leaders and far-right fascists is to seize control of that populist sentiment so that it doesn't fall under the sway, so it doesn't fall under the auspice of leftist movements, right? So that the ire of the populace does not turn on the billionaire class. That's the real truth. That they need to find other excuses. They need to find other people to scapegoat. And historically, that has been minorities and immigrants, right? And you can see that upswing happening in our own country today, where there's been a huge upswell of immigrants into Canada recently, with the Liberals actually enacting a policy of bringing more immigrants into the country, while on the far right is scapegoating them. And if you attempt to point at the billionaire class and say, hey, these billionaires are obviously making off with the goods, well, no, they earned it. They earned it and you're just jealous. You just need to work harder, right? So, or if you're a person of color, a minority group of any sort. So it's, we are seeing that populist sentiment. While I tend to agree with you, that populist sentiment is itself understandable, it's being seized by the far right. That's why you have the conservatives leading in the polls. I've been showing this poll for a little while now and haven't commented on it. Worth doing. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe, guys. Make sure you hit the bells, hit the whistles, do all the stuff. Donate a little bit of money if you've got it jangling around your pocket. And please, more than anything, tell people that I exist. That's the most important part, is telling people I exist. The upswell of conservative power in the country Doesn't make any sense. Like it's actually like kind of lunacy, honestly. Like the problems that we are facing as the nation are because the structure of capitalism is failing, that it's not working. Well, it is working, but it's not working for the people. That the way the system of capital is designed, it's a system of extraction and abandonment. And instead of actually understanding that as a people, instead of saying the system of capitalism is turning against us as it's designed to do, what we should do is we should swing to the left and talk to the people who are saying the system of capital needs to, at the very least, be reformed. That's not my position. My position is that the system of capital needs to be done away with and needs to be overthrown. But at the very least, we should be talking to the people who are saying that the system of capital needs to be reformed in serious ways. Well, instead of that, it seems like what's happening is people are going, the problem is Trudeau. The problem is Justin Trudeau personally. And so we need to get rid of Justin Trudeau and go for the other side, which is conservatives who are also extremely pro-capital and are extremely pro-neoliberalism and are going to continue the policies of the Trudeau administration and continue the decline of Western civilization and continue the decline of the society. And what's going to be very interesting to see is about 2 years after Pierre Poilievre is elected, people are going to start realizing it. They're going to see that nothing has changed, right? If someone told you that both parties in America are right-wing, what would you say to that? Both parties in America are right-wing. Like, Aaron, both parties in America and all three parties, actually, the CPC, the NDP, and the LPC, right? These parties are allies. That they work together, that it is WWE showmanship, right? It's not a legitimate conversation. It's not actual politics. It is theater dressed up to look like politics. It isn't actually politics. That the differences that they find in each other are on diversity issues, culture issues, immigrants good, bad, that kind of thing. But on all of the issues that actually matter, they're in complete lockstep. They're in complete lockstep with one another. Like, you can't vote against the Palestinian genocide. Like, you there's no party to vote for that will actually be like, yeah, we're going to end the Palestinian genocide. Right? There's no party that you can vote for that'll actually be like, yeah, we should probably reduce rent and make it so that landlords don't have so much power in the society. Right? There is no party for you to vote for. That there's no party that will actually represent the rights of the working people in serious ways. There are parties that say they do, but obviously are false. Like, that's obviously false. That they exist in order to be the end of the conversation and to be the graveyard for leftist ideas. They don't exist. They don't exist as a legitimate counterpoint or a counterbalance. Resist Occupiers, good to see you. Yeah, China has already isolated itself from software hegemony, plus a huge stake in rare earth minerals, and India has plenty of software engineers to begin challenging on the world stage. Yeah, quoting Aaron Hansen, Call of Duty, shoot a man. Yeah. MAGA is literally a fascist sentiment. Yeah. That's what's so funny, man. Like, I saw a clip of a guy walking around being like, well, tell me why Trump is racist. And people were like struggling. And I'm like, the slogan MAGA, Make America Great Again, is a fascist slogan. Like, it comes out of the Ku Klux Klan. Like, I don't know how people whiff on this. June, if Ron DeSantis somehow was pushed out of the Republican Party by Trump and won the Democratic nomination for president, who do you think would do you think the vote blue no matter who types would still support him? I mean, as we've been moving forward with Joe Biden and as I've been talking to more and more Democrats, right? Sometimes a Democrat will come into this chat and we'll have a conversation with them. I've learned very strongly that they're just as lunatic. Like, they're just as crazy. Like, blue MAGA is real. That the people who are like foaming at the mouth Democrats are not. It's not a Trump cult. Like, Trump has a little cult around him, right? But the same cult exists for the Democrats, but it's just for the party. There isn't an icon the way that exists with Trump, but it's the same kind of fervor, and it's the same kind of vile. Like, it's the same kind of stupid, brain dead illegitimacy. That's why Russiagate worked, right? Because all the Democrats, all the blue MAGA people just shut their brains off and went, yeah, it was Russia. It was Russia that they funded Trump, and they're the guy. That's why Hillary lost, because Russia. Right? Okay, well, what evidence do you have? None? Oh, okay. So, like, it was manic. It was just, like, really manic watching the Democrats fall into this kind of insane mania where they believed something that was obviously false instead of actually asking themselves seriously, how in God's name did Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton? How the fuck did that happen? And it's because the way that they think is incestuous. They have no ideas. They're brain dead. The way that they think about politics itself is wrong-headed. Like, they have this kind of idea of, you got to vote Democrat. Who else are you going to vote for? Right? Which is a really shitty way to run a political party. And so, so the cult exists. So if Ron DeSantis was somehow pushed out of the Republican Party and won the Democratic nomination for president, yeah, vote blue no matter who. Absolutely. Because the cult of the Democrats is about the Democrats. It's not about a figure. It's not like Trump, right? And once Trump is out, which happens eventually, right? Those cultists are going to go somewhere, and that cult energy is going to go somewhere, right? And that cult energy will likely just remain in the Republican Party, and you'll have other candidates. You can already see it. The most recent Republican debates were not about vote for me for president today, right? It was about vote for me once the time comes for you to move away from Trump. That people are jockeying for position once Trump is gone, which eventually he has to be. And eventually there'll be a moment when Donald Trump will pull out a wand and he'll go bing on top of one of these guys. And so you have like a whole crew of ghouls who are basically trying to pay fealty to these Trumpists. And so the baton will be passed forward, and the cult will shift from one figure to another. But it'll remain in the Republican Party for sure. How is MAGA fascist? Fascism is merely national syndicalism, class collaboration. The word fascist has been reduced to a mere slur instead of a way to succinctly describe Italy under Mussolini and similar national syndicalist movements. And I reject Umberto Eco. Well, if you reject the guy that's like one of the major people who are defining what fascism means, then I think you can kind of just define it how you like. But let's just use your definition then, right? Merely national syndicalism. So let's get real specific. This is good. I like this kind of stuff. This is nice. National syndicalism. I spelt that wrong, but it'll fix it. Definition. Like, let's get real specific about it. Like, I tend to agree with, and I think you are probably talking that this is probably what you are referring to, is that to me, I agree with Mussolini's definition of what fascism is, which is a merger of business and state, right? When the state and the corporate sector begin operating exclusively for the benefit of itself and at the expense of the populace, that's fascism. Much in the same way that if the church and the state merge, that's theocracy. Well, when businesses and when the business class and the state merge, that's fascism. That's more or less like the cleanest possible way that I can talk about what I think that fascism represents. A far-right adaptation of syndicalism to suit the broader agenda of integral nationalism, national syndicalism defend. It's not a very good definition, honestly. Like you would think that you would have, but then they have like this, a broader agenda of integral was theorized, mainly expressed the ultra-royalist circles, sought to be a counter-revolutionary doctrine, providing a national doctrine that could ensure the territorial cohesion and grandeur of the French state. Firstly, politics first, that is, the nationalist, political, Catholic, and monarchist movements must focus their efforts on changing the political and constitutional order, rather than accepting the victory of radical republicanism and displacing their activity into the social or cultural purists. Oh, the belief that the Enlightenment in general and the French Revolution in particular had broken a traditional social contract. He held that by stressing allegiance to the cultural and political nation-state, they had erased an older patriotism based on allegiance to more organic units such as family, petit pays, and monarchy, right? The hierarchy! These are natural forces that exist, etc. I'm a classical liberal. Yeah. So essentially the idea is that there's traditional, you have what's considered to be traditional modes of thinking, or natural is the word that they would use, right? You could take a look at a guy like Jordan Peterson. He talks about this a lot, right? That the hierarchy is the lobsters and family and all of these sorts of things, and I just find it a little off-putting when people throw around fascism all the time. Yeah, a pretty common complaint, like how communist is thrown around all the time, when most who mutter those words don't understand them. Yeah. No, I understand the complaint, and a call for specificity is fine by me. I don't have a problem with that. But I do think that MAGA does fall pretty neatly, frankly, under a fascist banner. That what they want is they want a strong, powerful leader in order to bring prosperity to family, to traditional structure. Like the whole woke culture wars is a way to fight back against liberal diversity and all of these sorts of things in order to usher in a more traditionalist viewpoint. And the way that they want to organize the society is through kind of an ushering in and an empowerment of corporate power, right? That they don't want the government to be involved at all in corporate power structure and let the free market decide kind of thinking, which is exactly what the free market would like. It's essentially allowing the corporations to rule openly. So I don't know what's more fascist than that. Like that's to me that's like the hardcorest, most dedicated fascist thing that you can want, is a straight up declaration that corporations and the free market should rule, right? And that the state only exists to protect the corporation's right to rule. Like to me, that's just naked, open fascism. And that's essentially what the MAGA theory is. Part of it is it's difficult to pin down, of course, because I do think that there is a lot of nobody within the MAGA cult is willing to stand up and actually write a meaningful manifesto. And when they do write a meaningful manifesto, they're certainly not going to evoke words like fascist. They're not going to make it as naked as all that. Aaron, I think the one book that I think I would direct you to, because I think it's actually very prescient on this, would be Chris Hedges' work, Christian Fascists. And he does really good work. Oh, yeah. Baked Potatoes hitting on something here that I actually do agree with as well, which is Michael Hudson argues that the U.S. and the West has been built solely to serve the 0.1% and elites since inception. Their forefathers have always had this policy, and the current U.S. congressmen have simply followed along. This is the reason why it forces itself and its client states to deindustrialize and become financed, pro-rent seeking and anti-labor, which is why no bill ever gets passed to benefit the masses and never will. Yeah, I think that's true. Like, that's why it's like the Trump is a fascist thing, I think is a convenient bit of narrative work from the Democrats in order to stir up fear and have people swing over to their side. But like the Democrats are literally enacting a genocide right now, right? So like how useful is the conversation actually? Like how useful is it to get bogged down in this conversation of whether or not MAGA or Trump are in fact fascist, when it's pretty obvious that American society and American culture for a long time has been pretty fascist, right? Like the Vietnam War and the Laos War and the Cambodian War were acts of grotesque brutality. The nuking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? World War II itself, just as a force that existed, like it's pretty brutal, right? Pretty brutal across the board. And so why are we I just like the distinctions I think are technically nice, but like it's not like capitalism has always been this like super rosy force in the world. Like what was it or was it not fascism when they were committing a genocide against the First Nations people? Was it or was it not fascism when they were enacting a policy of slavery? Was it or was it not fascism when they had a civil war over it? Like when does it only become fascism when it affects us? Like if we go to the Middle East and we start carpet bombing the Middle East, that's fine and cool. But if that comes home and we start fighting amongst ourselves, it's suddenly fascism, you know? Like, so it always seems to have this kind of like it only seems to be fascism when it affects us. Like when Adolf Hitler rises up, it's fascism. But when we go to Africa and colonize the entire continent, that's cool and normal. That's just business. That's just how it works. Yeah, Aaron writes, I mean, you could have a normal nuclear family without a subservient wife or stripping women of rights. I think to me it all just comes down and you're gonna hit this wall with me over and over and over and over again as we have this conversation. People should be allowed to do what they want. So if what you want is you want to get together with a partner and you want to have a little nuclear family and you want to have kids and that's what you want to have, cool, good for you, right? And if what you want is to not have that, right, and you want to just exist in the world, cool and good for you, right? I think that people should be supported in reality. Everyone should have access to food and shelter. That to me is the, like, if you want to talk about what I believe is the core principle, I tend to believe in what I call linchpin thoughts. It's easy to get lost in a lot of fringe details. It's easy to kind of get lost down little rabbit holes. It's easy to kind of do all that kind of stuff. I prefer to look at a person and say, okay, what's the absolute basis of your belief system? Like, what's the absolute cornerstone? What's the linchpin, right? So, for example, someone like Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro's linchpin is that he believes a magic book tells him what to think. That's the absolute linchpin of his belief system. He has outright said out loud that he believes the Torah comes from God and that the rules that within it are good rules that we have to justify a postscript. This is the linchpin of his thinking, and it's why he's a fool, right? That's why he's a fool. And so for me, the linchpin of my thinking is that food and shelter should be free, freely available for everyone. That we shouldn't have to pay for it. It shouldn't have to be something that we work for. If we do have to work for it, it's only to the degree in which it is necessary to produce or maintain. right? So if everybody needs to put in 10 hours a week in order to make sure that the machines and the system is spitting out food, right, and that the buildings are in good repair and that we're building more buildings, right? If everybody needs to put in a little bit of labor for that, fine, that makes sense, right? And everybody should do as much labor as we should make that as equal as possible. So having one person do 80-hour work weeks while another person is starving is ludicrous, right? So, but otherwise, food and shelter should be freely available to everyone. And of course, we have to organize that in rational ways. But that should be the precept and that should be the principle. And moreover, I hold the belief that it is indefensible to withhold food and shelter from people for any reasons on any lines. That food and shelter should be free. And this is the cornerstone of how capitalism maintains its power over us. That's why when capitalists say or try to motivate us in order to do something, well, they use food and shelter against us. They use the threat of homelessness against us. And it's pretty clear that that's what is done. And so if we actually wanted to defang the capitalist class completely, and if we wanted to actually disempower the system of capital, if we wanted to actually turn the machine off, right, we would ensure everybody had access to food and shelter and didn't need to answer to these psychopaths. Very straightforwardly. And then if you wanted to have your nuclear family, you could. And if you wanted to be a single person living in the world, you could. And if you wanted to be gay living out in the world, you could. And if you wanted to be trans living out in the world, you could. And nobody can tell you otherwise, because everybody has access to food and shelter. No judgment, no rationale, no justification. No need to stand up and prove to somebody that you are allowed to have food and shelter. You just get it. You just have it. And too bad. Like, tough shit. Do you like the tenets of the Satanic Temple? I think it's a far better religion than any other. I get why the Satanists exist. I just think that it's a bit silly. That's all. Like, I get that they exist to be as a counterfoil to modern Christianity, but at the end of the day, they're still Christian, right? They still kind of adhere to the Christian worldview, and they still view things through that kind of Christian lens. They're just kind of inverting things, right? And kind of throwing it on their head. And I understand why they do that. I just don't think it's very necessary, right? Like, I attempt to discuss what is going on in the world through a lens that just makes sense for itself. That's it. That it just makes sense for itself. That you are a randomly generated life form on a randomly generated planet in a randomly generated universe, upheld by the force of creation and by whatever unknown force this actually is. You exist in that state, and everything essentially falls out from that. The idea that we should stand up and hold on to ideas of selfishness or self-worth or any of this kind of stuff is absurd. That I worked for it, so I should earn it is ridiculous in the face of a total randomly generated power system. Like, it's the belief systems that Christianity certainly, but the capitalist death cult definitely hold on to are absolutely asinine, childish, and ridiculous in the face of the reality of what your existence actually is, right? And if you're honest about what your existence actually is, it's hard not to be very humbled by it. It's hard not to actually stand there and be like, oh shit, yeah, like 1 billion years of evolution so that I could stand here and work in a fucking cubicle for some psychopath who's withholding food and shelter for me. It doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, it's ridiculous what we're doing and how we're acting. And what we should be doing is we should be demanding, like, the demand that we should be having is that we should be free to explore what the universe is. Because to me, it's very clear that the reason we exist at all as life forms at all is so that we can discover what the universe actually is and what creation is. That we are actually creation discovering itself. And that instead of recognizing that, honoring that, and being honest about that, and saying to one another, oh, okay, like we are actually aspects of the force of creation attempting to discover itself. We are the mouths and the ears and the eyes of God, if you like, or of creation, if you prefer, or of the creative energy, if you want to keep it as secular as possible. We should have a big discussion about that and what that actually means. And we should see what this creation actually is. And we should learn about it. We should learn how to live with it. Right? And instead of that, we're all flipping burgers and making lattes and shuffling papers around, worshiping an invisible money god that we all invented. It's ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous what we are and what we're doing. Right? It's absolutely stupid what we're doing. And to me, it all is just comes from this place of deep fear. And the thing that's so absurd about all of it, right, is that we're all scrambling around, working our asses off, trying as hard as possible to quote unquote plan for the future, right? That's my favorite, plan for the future, right? Do you guys not understand what the end of this all is? Like you get there's no escape hatch, right? Like you understand there's no escape plan. There's no escape strategy. You understand? Like the end of your story is that you die. That's it. That's the end of your story. And we all get so wrapped up and so trapped in this idea that, oh my God, I gotta plan for the future. Oh my God, I gotta plan for the future. I gotta plan for the future. That you spend all your youth and all your middle age and all your old age scrabbling around in this state of total fear while careening towards something that you were always going to careen towards. The moment of your death is written in the stars. It is a thread that is pulled by the fates themselves, and your life will be snipped, and it is unavoidable. You cannot sidestep it. And yet you spend your entire life pretending like it's not happening. And so what do? You scrabble away for these worthless capitalists trying to climb up their stupid goddamn hierarchy to pile up a whole bunch of invisible currency that buys you fucking nothing. Near as I can tell, all it's doing is digging a deeper grave to hell. That's basically all I can tell that it's doing. But it's and instead of actually pausing and thinking to yourself, wait a minute, I'm a randomly generated life form living temporarily in a state of energy. These capitalists' opinion don't matter at all. Who gives a shit what these people think? Why do we even listen to them? And the moment you ask that question, why do we even listen to these people? Right? You'll realize pretty quickly that the only reason we listen to them is because they withhold food and shelter from us. That's the only thing that gives them any power whatsoever. That we've just acquiesced to them the right to withhold food and shelter from us. And it's ridiculous. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Some asshole was just given a piece of paper by his dad that said you owned it. And then when you go down far enough the line, you realize that it's literally some guy murdering someone on that spot and then writing on the piece of paper in that fucking guy's blood, I own this spot, fucking die. It's like ridiculous. Like, my favorite thing to point out is what in America it's called the Homesteaders Act, and here it's the Canadian Dominion Act. I love this. This is my absolute favorite fact. Through the 1800s, there was a law passed that allowed any white British man, that's in the legislation, white British man, to go out to the Midwest or to the prairies and to settle there, right? To colonize it. Basically murder all the indigenous population on that land and then put a bunch of white British men there. And you could go out to the prairies and out to the land, and for like a fee of like $10, you would get 360 acres of land. So basically 360 acres of free land just given to you for just going out there. Like, if you can't make money on 360 acres of fucking free land, all you have to do is clear cut it and sell the lumber. Like, and there you go, you're rich. And you don't even need to plant. And for, like that's like the most difficult fucking thing in the world. Take some seed, put it in the ground, pull out the wheat, sell it. Like the opportunity of it And then my favorite part about it is that as the generations have gone down, what's happened? That free land that was given to those people freely passed down from generation to generation until now you've got these fat, lazy, rich capitalists sitting on land that their daddy gave them, telling everybody else how to work hard and that government handouts are bad. This is the smartest way to organize a society. This is the best way to do it, right? Is to make sure that the people who have control of our food generation and our food supply are the most detached narcissists possible. Absolutely, the best way to do it. Absolutely. I feel it's the objectification of people that capitalism does that leads to divorces more than anything. There's no inherent spiritual relationship in the capitalist framework between a man and a woman. Disallowing divorce will only curb the symptom, not the problem underlying it. Well, so many of our relationships are commodified, right? People get into relationships based on economic lines, and they stay in relationships based on economic lines because it's harder to be single. It's more expensive to be single. Right? Like if you live in an apartment with someone else, you pay half the rent. If you live in an apartment alone, you pay the rent. And so people stay in bad relationships and people get into bad relationships strictly based on economic lines. And you can see that all over the conversation today. It's openly shared. It's not a secret. If you go down like a little dating rabbit hole on any of the social media, you're going to find out pretty fast that the number one thing that people are looking for is what's his job and how much money does he make, right? That's just the hard truth of it. That's what it is. That's dating in America because our relationships, our whole life becomes a commodity, right? We are just commodities. And then so you end up with these people who get into these relationships that are basically based on commodification, and then they recognize, after a period of time, they don't actually like one another. Right? They don't actually respect each other. They don't like what the other person stands for because the other person doesn't stand for anything. Because we are generally a people without principle. Because the three things that the capitalist death cult worships are money, the self, and chaos. Those are the three things that the capitalist death cult worships. And you can't really build anything on that. It's not really a way to build a stable structure, a stable system. You can't build a stable structure on worshiping yourself, worshiping a fake money god, and worshiping chaos. It just doesn't work. You can't build a foundation on that. And to me, like building relationships within the structure of capitalism is almost impossible. The only way that you can really achieve it is if both of you understand the situation and the circumstances that you're actually in. And you both go into the relationship understanding that I'm not here to treat you as a commodity. I'm not here because I need you to make my life financially easier, or that we're here just to be financial supports to one another, right? Like to me, if you go into a relationship like that, you either have to kind of bite the bullet and just acknowledge that's what's going on and just live that way. As I think many people have, as I think many people amongst the rich have done. The history of monarchy sort of shows that that's the case. Or you just split up because you just realize like I want something more than this. I want something more than just a dollar value, a value add, right? Yeah. One den room in Vancouver now costs $1,200. Wow, only $1,200. In Toronto, it'd be $2,000. Divorce rates and the collapse of family structure is merely a symptom of the JP is not infallible. Yeah, I would argue that JP is certainly not infallible. It's a little wrong to depict American colonization similarly to the colonization of the Palestinians, for example. False. Hard wall. You're hitting a hard wall with that, Aaron. The colonization of North America was brutal, vicious, swift, that the First Nations people were seen as a problem to be removed, and they were removed. That there were wars fought all the way from Washington, all the way up to Lincoln, up to the modern day. We literally have the Canadian Parliament voting in favor for a residential school system in order to cleanse the Indian or kill the Indian, right? Like if you want to stand in this chat and downplay the seriousness of the colonial period, then I think you're a goddamn fool. Like, I just don't think you're being serious. I really, really question why you're doing it. Like, what's your goal there? What are you hoping to achieve there? Because the absolute ethnic cleansing and the genocide of the First Nations people was absolutely crazy and barbaric. The intentional spreading around of smallpox through the spreading around of smallpox blankets is actually extremely well known. So to be like, oh, it was mainly diseases. Yeah, diseases that we intentionally spread within the populace, without a doubt, 100% for sure. The mass looting, the mass rapes, the mass slavery, like the residential system itself, the reserve system itself, like and this is all in the public record, my man. Like, this is all in the public record. Like, it's not only is it extremely brutal and swift and ridiculous, it's also extremely well documented. So this idea that the colonization of the Americas was somehow nice, or at least not as bad as what's going on. If you are looking at Gaza and thinking to yourself, boy, that's brutal, holy cow, that's ridiculous, that is exactly what happened, right? We are just now filming it, right? We're seeing it occur in real time with our eyes. That's the major difference. So that while it's unfolding in front of us, we are bearing witness to the event as it occurs. Well, that's what it was. That's exactly what it was. And for you to pretend like it wasn't is cope. And that's all it is. Total cope. You're just coping with the idea that, well, my culture can't be that brutal. Yes, it can, and it always has been. It always has been. The West constantly genocides the world and then cries about people like Putin. The Westerner has lost all credibility whatsoever. There's an actual genocide happening before our eyes, and these Yankee pigs are still oinking about Putin and Ukraine. Yeah, isn't that great? Isn't that great? While completely ignoring, like, I just love that, like, these guys actually think that we can walk up to a bear and stick our thumb in the bear's eye and then just be complete. And then when the bear fights back, we're like, oh, what? Whoa, what a crazy bear. Like, that's exactly what we've done. We walked up to a bear that was literally like growling and snarling at us. And then we took a stick and we poked the bear in the eye. And now we're acting like, oh no, the bear. Oh, everybody. Oh, sympathy for us. We have to support the people the bear is mauling. Like, fuck you. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, on a basic human level, yeah, I wish a bear was not mauling those people. But you're the one that poked the bear in the eye, right? Like, you didn't see the bear growling. You didn't see the bear, like being territorial. You didn't see the bear. Like, you didn't see all the signals. No, you had to send John McCain over, eh? You had to do the 2014 coup. You had to embark on a war in the Donbass, right? You had to create a line along the Donbass and start shelling the people there for 8 years, right? You had to do these. This is all completely necessary, right? And Russia shouldn't be threatened by any of that, right? Russia shouldn't be threatened by any of that. This is a normal thing that normal countries do. Russia should be totally fine that a former Soviet Union state is actually getting shelled by literal neo-Nazis that are waving a Nazi flag, right? They shouldn't be threatened by that at all. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here, man. Get the fuck out of here. You know what I love about that analogy is that it's right in line with our propaganda about Russia. Russia's a bear. It's always been a bear. Right? And we poked the bear in the eye. Well, look what happens. Look what happens. Corey says, Europe and the USA carved up land for Israel after World War II for Jewish people. But rather than give them land for their own countries, they took it from people in the Middle East without even asking. Yeah, it's just a colonial project that they knew that they needed a base in the Middle East, and this is the way that they're doing it, right? They're getting a base in the Middle East. They have essentially said as much, and this is the plan that they moved forward with. This is the endeavor, and this is the way that they're achieving it. And from the Western perspective, given what their goals are, and given what their strategic military goals are, yeah, they need a military base in the Middle East, right? That military base is named Israel. That's what it's all about. And it's the reason why America will die on this hill, right? Like, America will die on this hill. Like, the very, very last thing that will happen before America starts experiencing major internal collapses is defund Israel. It'll be the very last thing that occurs. So if we ever see that occur in our lifetime, we know what's going on. We know that this is it for America. This is the last possible gasp of America. Native population in Latin America went from 112 million to about 11 million. Yeah, in a few years. Oh yeah, what happened in Latin America is crazy. There were entire civilizations in Latin America. You had the Aztecs, the Incans, the Mayans, and they just vanished. They just fucking vanished. Like straight up in like a very short period of time. And the looting that happened was insane. Like, you take a look at all of the structures that exist in a place like Peru, for example, right? All of the Peruvian Mayan ruins, right? And you take a look at this stuff, and you realize that everything that exists there, like every crevice, everything that existed there was inlaid with gold, right? That they had inlaid all of that with gold, and the Spaniards basically pulled. That's why Spanish gold became a big thing for a period of time. What do you think they were doing? They took all that gold and they melted it down and they turned it into coinage, and they built a weird little empire based off of it. And there's a Catholic priest who wrote, I forget his name offhand, but he wrote a record of this, and he attempted to save some of this stuff, that some of the gold that rather than having it melted down, right? Rather than having it melted down, he tried to save some of it. And of course, it's in a museum somewhere, of course. Careful of whataboutism. Just because we are doing crimes doesn't mean that they are blameless. Who's they in that conversation? It means we are both criminals. Corey, I just don't know what that comment is in reference to. So, what article do I really want to focus? Oh, hey, here's some good news. Let's focus on a little bit of good news for just a moment. We should all have a little moment of celebration. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner and abominable no man, dies at 99. So long, Charlie. I hope you're in hell now. Literally one of the last things that this guy said was, "Oh man, I could have made $1 trillion." Yep. Canadian commie tribute to people who are fortunately no longer with us. And the world gets a little bit brighter. And it warms my heart because it makes me realize that I'm going to be alive to see Warren Buffett go. I'm going to get to see Bill Gates go. It's going to be nice to see Elon Musk go. You know, it's going to be nice to like wave farewell and flip these guys off as they walk out the door, right? Yep. Rip bozo. Bye-bye. Literally just a money hoarder, just a vampire, right? Well, regarding Russian crimes or Chinese crimes for that matter. Yeah, you know, Corey, I got to tell you, like, when it comes to the Ukrainian conflict, I just don't know what the Russians could have done. Like what's your solution? For real. Like I understand that it's bad. Like I'm not a huge fan of it. I'm not sitting here being like, haha, Russia, the greatest country that ever lived. But like, should they have just continued to allow Nazis to bomb like former Russians, like ethnic Russians on their border? Like, is that something that we should have just permitted? If there were Nazis shelling people on the border between New York and Toronto, I would expect my military to do something about it. Just straight up. I would not be sitting here being like, well, we need to be prudent and come up with this. I would literally be like, we have a military. We know where they are. What's the story? Like, I'm not celebrating it. I'm not a huge fan of it. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend as though what Russia did was this abominable, horrible act. Like, there were Nazis shelling ethnic Russians on the Russian border. As soon as you understand that, I'm just like, yeah, like, the Russians have a long history of fighting Nazis. They've got a pretty long entrenched history, and to watch Westerners fund Nazis on their border was a threat, a legitimate threat. So, like, is the crime that they fought back? Is that the crime? Echo Man Zero writes, whether you don't like the current business culture, its existence allows for people to learn from its negatives, bad practices. You know, Echo Man, what's your point on there, dude? Like, what's that? Like, so? You know, you can not like Ted Bundy, but he really showed you how to not get caught. Mexican cartels killed one. Yeah, Mexican cartels killed one American, and Americans want to invade Mexico. Yeah, exactly. Well, because that's how it works, right? Like, this is my favorite about people who attempt to justify the Palestinian genocide based on what happened on the October 7th. It's like, even if October 7th was as bad as you think it was, it's no justification whatsoever. Incidentally, here's a good segue. We did it. We found the segue. Evidence shows Israel killed many of its own citizens on October 7th, then blamed Hamas. To date, the Israeli government has killed 14,000 Palestinians in Gaza since October 7th, at the beginning of history. Almost half of them children. It carpet-bombed whole neighborhoods. It's not allowing 1.7 million Gazas to return to the homes. To justify this destruction, Israel wants to make it all about what happened on October 7th and not what happened since then. On that day, it says, Hamas militants charged into Israel with a mission to kill as many civilians as possible in the most brutal ways. The Netanyahu regime even has a 47-minute propaganda video it shows the press and diplomats entitled Hamas Massacre. One by one, Tel Aviv stories claim of deliberate atrocities by Palestinian fighters, beheading children, raping women, using hospitals as military bases, have been debunked. Now, there's a growing body of evidence that many of the Israeli civilians Tel Aviv claimed were killed by Palestinian fighters on October 7th were actually killed by the Israeli military. Over the last month, eyewitness testimonies and other evidence has surfaced, indicating that a great many of those blasted and torched on October 7th, Palestinians and Israeli alike, were the victims of indiscriminate and massive Israeli tank and helicopter bombardment. Essentially, the story is as straightforward as this, guys. The breakthrough happened and a bunch of Palestinian fighters came out and Israel lost its shit and just started bombing the area, and they didn't care who they killed. That's it. Like, that's the fucking story. And then they turned around and went, it's Hamas's fault. Like, it's just a shit show, dude. It's just a fucking shit show. Charmar says, I actually met a Russian girl who lived in Ukraine as a minority community. She supported Russia's actions because she said her community was immensely discriminated by Ukrainians. Yeah, and it was. Like they passed laws saying that you couldn't speak Russian any longer. You had to communicate in Ukrainian. Like, I mean, it's like one of the major signs that a genocide is happening is to cleanse people's ethnicity, right? That you're not allowed to actually speak your own language. There were massacres happening in like Mariupol. There's all kinds of crazy shit that went on in that 8-year period, right? Like almost a decade, right? And so for me, like, yeah, fight back. Russia is a kleptocratic oligarchy, so I have trouble giving them the benefit of the doubt. If they were a legitimate socialist democracy and not fighting genocide with genocide, I mean, to make the claim that what is happening is a genocide, I think is a bit of an overstatement. Like, what evidence do you have to support the idea that it is actually a genocide? Like, have there been big stories of major ethnic cleansing? Are they even attempting to remove the language? Like, I don't see evidence of a genocide. Like, I see evidence of a war, right? I see evidence of a war, but a genocide is a pretty major social project, right? One that needs to be organized and one that needs to be enacted. Like, there's no such thing as like a secret hidden genocide, you know? So if your claim is that it is actually a genocide, then can I see the speeches that Putin gave? Can I see the bureaucrat? Can I see the planning documents? Right? Because these things would certainly exist. Right? Soldiers are not just going to begin a policy of ethnic cleansing without planning documents, without authority, right? Without permission. And the reason why I can say this so confidently is that when we actually do see real genocides happen, such as what's going on in Palestine, there are planning documents. Like, Netanyahu has given speeches, right? Like, it's very straightforward. Echo Man says, I'm just saying it being here can have a bad impression. Yeah, a bad impression, okay. But people will learn from it. It's not comparable with Ted Bundy. It's exactly comparable. Yeah, dude, the corporations are literally killing the planet to make a buck. It's worse than Bundy. Yeah. Yeah. It's just the hardest of the hardest truth. Like, climate change is real. The genocide of the Palestinian people has corporate sponsorship, right? Like, they're not slapping their brand logo all over it, but like, it's pretty standard fare. I just don't get why I'm supposed to accept this apologism. Oh, we'll just learn from it. No, we won't. What are you talking about? Capitalists don't learn from their mistakes. They forget the mistakes that they made and then they do them again. That's what they actually do. There's no reforming the capitalist system, right? There's no capitalism that's actually good, right? There's no happy, sunshiny, ethical capitalism coming. We just need to learn from our mistakes and then do capitalism better. No, the way we learn from our mistakes is by ridding ourselves of the system of capital and overthrowing it completely, by removing the people who have power from power and disempowering them completely. Like, no longer allowed to be part of the conversation. Goodbye, farewell. Your kooky, weird little fetishism of free speech is not important in the face of these obvious psychopathic monsters who are committing massive genocides and incidentally trying to kill the entire species through climate change. Like, it's wild to me, the amount of apologism that we're willing to give. That we're literally just like glucking on these guys' cocks while they're actively spitting on us and our families and our children. Like, it's crazy. It's fucking crazy. Be rid of the system of capital. If we were actually capable of learning in the manner that you suggest, that would be the only lesson that we would actually take away. Be rid of it. The whole conflict is sad. Russians and Ukrainians are brothers. They fought the Nazis side by side. Yeah. Like, it is sort of like it makes you think, like when the Ukrainians were released from the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union was dismantled, if Ukraine had have remained part of Russia, would we actually be seeing this conflict today? But that's like a sort of a wishful thinking, sort of alternate reality kind of thing. Yeah, Russia has taken in more Ukrainian refugees than any other country. What do you mean fighting genocide with genocide? Indiscriminate attacks against civilians, source required. Children, source required. Using ethnic settlement to justify the invasion. That's not what their justification was. The justification that they used was there were three major justifications. There was there's three war goals that Putin stated, and the war goals were the denazification of Ukraine, the demilitarization of Ukraine, and the seizure of the Donbass. Those are the three war goals that Putin stated right at the beginning, and looks to me like it's going pretty swimmingly. So I don't know where you're getting this using ethnic settlement to justify invasion from. I've never even heard of that. And so unless you're trying to convince me that Nazis are ethnic settlement, I don't understand. And again, indiscriminate attacks against civilians, children. Yeah, source required. I'll need to see a pretty good source for that, because all sides lie in war. I don't think that what we have been seeing from the Russians is indiscriminate attacks, the way that the United States and the way that Israel has done. I think that what we have been seeing from Russia has actually been a fairly plodding, thought out, steady motion. That initially, when the war began, Putin sort of hoped that he could go in from all sides with big force and get a quick resolution through diplomacy. That's what I think he was hoping for, and it didn't work. And so the Russians, once they realized that it wasn't going to be a diplomatic solution, they withdrew to the Donbass region. What the Americans call is, we pushed them out. What a joke. Yeah, sure, bud. You pushed them out for sure. It's not them figuring out a better way to move forward. And they drew a line, and they've been moving that line forward ever since. So this indiscriminate attacks, if you ask me, what the Russians have been doing has been very discriminate. It's been very, very plotting, specific. I don't think that they have the desire to be acting indiscriminately. I think that discriminate would be the way that I would describe how they've been handling things. Which, again, and I'll say this over and over again, right? What's so pathetic about this whole war is that it should have never happened. That if the leader of Ukraine was not a clown, led by the nose by Westerners and corrupt as shit, and any actual leader that actually cared about Ukraine would have literally just sued for peace right away. Would have immediately just been yeah, okay, yeah, sure, we'll be neutral. Yeah, we won't join NATO. Easy. What are you talking about? The whole thing is about whether or not Ukraine is going to join NATO, right? Just sign the paper, say you won't. What are you doing? This whole thing is ridiculous. Yeah, but Corey, this is more or less what I'm talking about, right? If I were to do this, okay, because believe me, I've done this, my man. I don't know that I want to do it on the live stream. Everybody lies in war. Everybody lies in war. It's a big reason why I don't care to go down this big, massive rabbit hole with this, because all sides lie in war, and all sides are incentivized to lie in war, right? And if your source is Wikipedia, I get a little okay, bud. And here's what's gonna happen. Here's what's gonna happen, because it happens every single time, right? We're gonna go to Wikipedia. We're gonna look at the source. We're gonna go to the bottom of the page, right? And the source is gonna be Radio Free Asia. No, the CIA says, right? The Ukrainian military says. And it's just like, I don't trust those sources, and I'm not really interested in listening to those sources, honestly. Like, I understand that that's what they say, right? That it's useful to hear what they have to say. But they don't have credibility. Like, these are lying liars who have lied all the time about everything. And so they're going to continue to lie. And is what is happening in Ukraine horrible? Yeah. Like, yeah. It's pretty nasty. It's pretty gnarly. It was completely preventable. The Russians don't want to be doing it, right? Like, if you actually listen to what the Russians are saying while this is happening, they're constantly in this perpetual state of being like, boy, does this suck, but it's necessary. And boy, would they love a diplomatic solution to this, right? And I mean, baked potato, the Google search results are all gamed. The top links are paid based on the highest bidder and usually is funded by corporate Western interests. Yeah. And also, like, it pays to remember that even the founder of Wikipedia himself has said that Wikipedia has become like a CIA asset, right? And this isn't to say that, like, Wikipedia is not useful. I still think that Wikipedia is useful for various reasons and for various things. But, like, I just think that skepticism needs to be as high as possible when you're using Wikipedia. Like, it really needs to be the highest it possibly can be. That you really, really gotta, like, put yourself in a mode of thinking, this is what the CIA wants you to see. This is how they want you to interpret this information. These are the words they want you to look at. This is what they want you to think, right? That's why words like authoritarian can get thrown into the discourse so easily, right? Because you don't need a source for this. You can just say that it's authoritarian, and people will just be like, authoritarian, and they'll just go along with it, right? Because it's such a nebulous, sort of vague descriptor. And so it gets used everywhere all of the time. And then, but I really strongly advise you, right? And I'll challenge you even on this. Because Corey, I think you're being well meant. You know, I don't think you're being disingenuous. Like, and we're all trying to figure this shit out. And especially when it comes to the subject of war, it's a very difficult subject to parse, right? But while you're parsing it, and while you're going through it, and while you're finding your information, right? Especially if you end up on Wikipedia, right? Actually go to the source and actually look at what the source actually is. And you're going to find out pretty fast that most of the time it's going to be an extremely skewed pro-Western source. And that extremely skewed pro-Western source in many occasions will be organizations like Radio Free Asia, straight up the CIA on many occasions. And that you really just shouldn't believe them. Like, I just think that it's at this stage in the game, given the history that these people have with us, the most prudent position is skepticism. That you just shouldn't believe what they have to say. And I would say that, like, 98% of the time when a story has started coming into the mainstream media, everybody comes into the mainstream media. When a story comes into the mainstream media, my first instinct is to say probably not. And I'm usually right. And then, Corey, I guess I'm getting a weird dissonance where everyone lies in war, but you seem to be accepting the Russian story whole cloth, but critical of everyone else to the point of ignoring sources. Well, my interpretation of what's going on is just based on the actions that have occurred on the field of battle. And that's it, right? Like, I don't need to believe the Russian story. I can see what has happened. Pretty plainly, I can see what has happened, right? That John McCain went to Ukraine. There was 100% a coup in Ukraine in 2014. The Azov Battalion is an open Nazi organization that exists in Ukraine. They have had Nazi parades. They have thrown the Nazi salutes. Their symbol is the wolf's head, is the wolf's angel, a Nazi symbol, right? You can you can find this stuff, and of course they're working really hard to try to obfuscate it as much as they possibly can because they don't want people to see this shit. There are external third-party sources. You've got people like Russell Bentley. Russell Bentley is a really interesting source in all of this, and he got purged along with Chris Hedges and all the RT people. When the RT see, this is the thing, right? Like, Corey, it's difficult for me to want to go on. Like, Amnesty International especially was caught up in the what was her name? There was a scandal that happened where it was Amnesty International that was pushing this idea during the Iran crisis, where a young lady went to the UN and actually confessed in front of the UN that they were killing babies in Iran. Yeah, the Neira testimony, right? And this is Amnesty International. So I feel like Amnesty International is one of these, like, and my feelings on Amnesty International has kind of gone like this a little bit, that they're not on that same kind of level as like the CIA is, where it's just like, no, probably not, right? Oh, well, the United States General said it. Oh, okay. But like, I'm skeptical of what Amnesty International has to say. Human Rights Watch, I don't really know that much about, and they don't really enter my field of vision very often. But like Corey, you are talking to a guy right now who says on many occasions, there is no credible institution in the West. It doesn't exist. And right now, what you're confronting is the reality that I mean it. Like, I'm not saying that for shock value. There is no credible institution that exists in the West. I think the most credible institutions that exist in the West are the strip clubs, because at least they're delivering on their promise. So the way you want to move forward with this stuff, in my history, and the best way to move forward with it, to maximize the amount of clarity, okay, is to remain neutral, first of all, right? Begin on a period of neutrality. Disbelieve liars, right? Like, as soon as you peg people for being just liars, you can just be like, probably not. Like, probably not, right? And seek out third-party sources, right? And I don't mean big, gigantic international organizations. I mean independent voices who have feet on the ground, right? This is why I really loved Russell Bentley, and I highly advise that people seek out Russell Bentley. He's a little bit more difficult to find now, but people have done interviews with him. Russell Bentley is a former U.S. Marine that when the conflict broke out in Ukraine, he essentially said, there are Nazis in Ukraine, I'm going there to fight them. And he moved there in 2015. He was on the ground during the shelling of the Donbass, reporting from there almost daily. And of course, once the Russian invasion began, YouTube scrubbed him. And so you can find his updates because, of course, Russell Bentley was smart enough to keep them. So you can find them. They're in like a mega download folder somewhere that you can find. Sorry, I said mega. I meant mega, not MAGA. Mega. I know it's a small kind of thing. And I highly advise seeking him out because he's a person who's been on the ground reporting from the ground the entire time. And that, to me, makes him far more trustworthy than anybody else in the conversation. So when you're talking about what source would I actually believe, I will trust that guy. Because he has sacrificed a lot. He has put himself in danger. He is on the front line. He is on the ground, and he is discussing the issue from the ground. That's the person who I'm going to trust. I don't trust I don't trust the Russian propaganda system. I'm not sitting here being like, yeah, what the Russians say, that's the thing. It just so happens that the Russians don't see cause to lie about what's going on. Because what's going on is pretty fucking crazy. That we've got literal neo-Nazis taking over the Ukrainian military. Zelensky has banned all opposition parties. There's now big questions about whether or not they're even going to have an election. Like, the Nazis are taking over the whole thing. And they're in the Donbass, shelling the people, banning them from speaking the language. Like, if I'm a Russian, I don't think I need to lie too much. I don't think I need to tell too many lies about that. I think the situation as it is pretty brutal. Another good source, another good third-party source would be Oliver Stone's Ukraine on Fire. That's another good place to take a look at for this situation, right? Another kind of third-party, non-affiliated, non-internationalist source. Because all nations and all parties have incentive to lie, and so you need to find the people who don't have the incentive to lie. That's the real secret about it all. You got to seek out and you got to find the people who don't have the incentive to lie. Like, what incentive does Russell Bentley have to lie? What incentive does Oliver Stone have to lie? And if you can answer the question, like, of course the Russian military has the incentive to lie. Like, of course the American military has the incentive to lie. But Russell Bentley, Oliver Stone, like, what's their incentive? The BBC, which says that skinny jeans are banned in North Korea. Yeah, even though you can go on Google Maps and say it's not true. Dude, the propaganda that comes out about North Korea is wild. The shit that they put in front of us and try to convince us of, right? The shit they try to convince us is real coming out of North Korea is absolutely wild to me. And it's wild to me that people buy it. It's wild to me that people are like, wow, North Koreans worship unicorns. There's only 12 permitted haircuts in North Korea. Like, it's gotten so ridiculous and absurd that now you can literally go to YouTube and you can just, like, Google people, or you can YouTube people. Like, people go to these countries, right? There are people who, like, go to North Korea and they spend time in North Korea and they bum around in North Korea. And almost universally, these guys, when they bum around in North Korea, they go, yeah, this is nothing like what I was expecting. This is nothing like how it was reported. This is nothing how it was described, right? I'm just supposed to believe it, right? Yeah, the same New York Times which said it would take between 1 and 10 million years for a flying machine to be built. That was proven wrong 9 weeks later. Corey writes, I get being skeptical of those sources, but human rights organizations are pretty reputable in my experience. I feel like what I'm trying to drive towards, Corey, is that human rights organizations can be infected by intelligence agencies as well. And I think the Naira testimony is pretty clear evidence of that occurring. Right? So I think that having these enormous, huge scale organizations and putting all your faith in what these huge, enormous organizations have to say, especially about war, right? It's a pretty tough. So I get that Ukraine is doing bad shit and largely at the behest of NATO, but that doesn't mean Russia isn't doing that too. The evidence seems pretty clear that it's two evil factions at war. I mean, Putin's an interesting figure, and the Putin administration is an interesting administration. I am not convinced. Putin's going to be an interesting figure when he dies. Everyone's going to really have a big conversation about who he was and what he meant. I don't think that Putin is on that scale. I don't even think he's as bad as George W. Bush, right? Like, what has you convinced? But I just don't know what has you convinced that Putin and the Russians are evil. What has got you like what invasion has occurred? Like what illegitimate action has occurred that has you convinced? Like I suppose what I'm asking is like what, like, are they self-interested? Sure. Like that I'll buy into. Like, I'm not trying to pretend like they're a country to admire. Like, I don't think we have much to learn from the Putin administration. You know, I don't think the Putin administration is like a leader in terms of how we should be running countries, and I don't think there's many good ideas that have come out of Russia under Putin. You know, because I don't think that's who he is, and I don't think that's what he is in the history of Russia. But if I'm to compare Putin and the Russians under Putin to almost any American president or any Western leader of any sort, like, I while they might be self-interested and while they might be Machiavellian in the way that they operate, evil, like, what's put us there? I'm unconvinced. Like, George W. Bush literally destroyed an entire country by just invading it because he wanted to, right? Like, he wanted the oil. He was threatened that Saddam Hussein was starting to trade off the dollar. And so they just they went in there, they hung Saddam Hussein, they invaded the country and destroyed it. Obama destroyed Libya. I just don't see the same kind of narrative existing with Putin. That when Putin goes to war, there's this very big defensive quality to it. And what's such a shame, I feel, from Putin's perspective, and I wouldn't be too surprised if at the end of his life he actually writes about this and talks about this, is that when he first came into power, he thought that he was going to be friends with the West. He thought that he was going to be doing business with the West. And he thought that he was going to be part of the G20 and part of the G7 and part of these international organizations, that he thought that he was sort of sticking the landing from Khrushchev and Gorbachev and all these, and Yeltsin and all these guys. And it just did not go that way. And so he's been forced to sort of interact on the world stage with these crazy madmen who are doing just the most insane shit possible. And like, again, do I think Putin and his crew are self-interested? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I just don't think that puts them on the same scale as the United States military. Right? Defending yourself against Western aggression and defending yourself against the Western imperial powers is not the same as being an aggressive imperial force in the world. It's just not of the same quality, and it's not on the same kind of a level. Do I wish that Putin was more interested in raising the standard of living and the quality of life for his own citizens? Sure, but he's not a communist, right? That at the end of the day, I think the word that I would really use for Putin would be opportunist. That's really the word that I would use for Putin, is that his hope for his tenure as the leader of Russia, I think, was to just basically put his hand on the wheel and kind of keep it where it was. That's sort of what he hoped he was going to do, right? But at the end, I think he's going to be seen as this interesting figure because he was forced to turn the wheel. He was put into this circumstance where he really wanted to turn the wheel. Or no, sorry, he wanted to keep the wheel straight, but he had to turn the wheel, and he had to turn away from the West and pivot to the global South, and that's going to be the primary criticism. I think that's where people are really going to talk about him, because that's the most important thing that he ever did in his tenure, unless something more serious happens, which is completely possible. But his pivot away from the West towards the global South is exactly what historians are going to really remember him for. No, I mean, Corey, I think, like, again, like, it's this is like the opportunistic aspect of it. I think that this is like Putin's not like a super nice man. That's kind of what I'm talking about, right? Like apparently rigged elections. I mean, every leader in any electoral system is going to do everything they can to maintain their own power. Ignore term limits. I don't think that actually happened. I think that what Putin did was he actually created a new. They created they created a new office, right? That Putin is the president, but there's a prime minister's office as well, and the prime minister's office is elected, but the president's office is not. And definitely with this, enrich the oligarchs, absolutely, right? Like there's been a whole the whole issue of arresting protesters, president like political assassinations. Yeah, like I just feel like what I'm trying to drive towards here, Corey, is like there are tiers. And I think the tier that I would put Putin on is opportunistic and Machiavellian. I put somebody like George W. Bush on the evil tier, because George W. Bush was ideologically driven, outright invaded countries to steal their resources. Like, so, I mean, and maybe you don't care about that. Like, maybe you just don't care about that, right? So, okay, that's fine. That maybe you're listening to me being like, why is he creating like these distinctions? Like, who cares? Like, Putin's obviously a piece of shit, right? Yeah, like most world leaders are. Like, I don't think you can be a world leader without doing some scummy shit. I just don't think it's possible. I don't think you can be the president or the leader of any country at any time without getting involved in some dark shit. I don't think it's possible. I don't think there is such a thing as a leader with his hands clean. And so you kind of just have to accept a certain degree of corruption and a certain degree of shenaniganry. You just have to do that, right? Or else everybody's just evil, and every leader throughout time is just this dark, evil figure that's and all like, and everything is just defined by the one shitty thing that they did, and they all do, because you have to. You cannot lead millions of people. You cannot lead millions of people cleanly. It's just not. It's just not. You kind of hope that you hope that that's not going to be the case, but it's just not real. Like, even the leaders that I venerate, or not venerate, but even the leaders that I think well of, thoughts about Stalin from Storyscape, right? Even someone like Stalin, who I respect. Stalin did some shitty stuff. Obviously he did, right? So the question is, like, was it so shitty that it overwhelms the other stuff that he did? Was the shit that he did over here so bad that it invalidates the positive stuff or the things that he did over here, right? Like, the invasion of Iraq is a defining moment for George W. Bush. A little bit of election malfeasance over here, and a little like even a political assassination. Like, is that a defining moment for Putin? Is history going to really be like, and then the assassination? Or are they going to be like, yeah, there was this guy that was talking shit, and so they got rid of him. And then the conversations that they had with China, the pivot that happened over here, right? Like, so I think it's just levels of scale, and I think that's just where I'm coming from. Like, it's not that I'm trying to forgive these people for this. It's just that when you've got, like, especially when the most powerful country on the planet is just this raving psychopath, I don't know. I guess it softens me a little bit. It makes me a little bit like, yeah, you got this lunatic over. Like, you literally have Jason Voorhees walking around with his big machete, just stabbing people and stealing their stuff everywhere. And then you got this guy over here who's like, hey, I'm going to skim a little off the top. You know, they're different. Yeah, Obama turned Libya into an open slave trade market. Okay, Storyscape. Thoughts about Stalin. I thought Stalin was a good leader. I thought that he's one of the most impressive world leaders through world history. He led the Soviet Union through an enormously difficult time. I think that the criticisms that can be laid at his feet are usually, especially when they come from Trotskyists, right, are usually kind of like like fan fiction. You know, if Stalin had have only done this, it would have been different. And it's like, probably not. You know, like probably not the case. That, like, would it have been different? Sure, but would it have been better? Like, who knows? It's just sort of like a fan fiction. Like, you're creating like an alternate reality where things would have just been different if this had have happened instead of this. Well, that's not what happened. What happened was that Stalin was in power, and Stalin very clearly popular in his own by his own people. He won the election. He defeated Trotsky when the time came. He attempted to step down on 4 separate occasions, and they wouldn't let him. He was the guy that was leading the nation through the Nazi invasion. Like, that's pretty crazy. Like, that's actually some crazy stuff to think about. That we're all supposed to sit here and be like, Stalin was a piece of shit, while he like defended his nation against the largest capitalist army that had ever been fielded. So it's pretty wild. And it looks by any account that Stalin's desire to improve the quality of life for his own citizenry was genuine. That he actually wanted that for his own people, and he actually wanted to improve the quality of life for his own people. And typically when Westerners critique Russian society post-World War II and they try to pin it on Stalin, they like to ignore the fact that 25 million Soviets were killed by Nazis, right? It's a pretty typical thing that happens in my experience. We're all just supposed to ignore the war, ignore that 25 million Russians were murdered by Nazis, ignore that entire cities were burnt down, right? Just ignore that. That didn't happen. Right? So more or less, I tend to agree with what, I think it was Dang that said this. Dang said 70% good, 30% bad when it came to Stalin. And I think that's probably about accurate, you know, that you can definitely find moments where Stalin, like to me, the assassination of Trotsky is which, you know, did Stalin assassinate Trotsky? Yes. I mean, come on. Like, what are we, dumb? Like, the assassination of Trotsky was pretty, the whole rivalry, honestly, the whole rivalry between Stalin and Trotsky is to me really, it really does come down to kind of just petty boysmanship, just two dudes who don't like each other. Right, that Trotsky is like a man of letters, a brilliant man, obviously, well-educated, obviously, capable, obviously, and Stalin, while being an intelligent man in his own right, was more a man of the people, right, and more interested in, and this is how he defeats Trotsky in the election, right, it turns out that when it comes to getting votes, the best way to do it is to be liked by people. And Trotsky wasn't very liked by people, right? And you can see why. Like, he's sort of this aloof, detached, like, kind of weirdo in many ways. Like, and even if you want to believe that, like, I tend to believe that Trotsky was well meant, that he believed in the project of communism, that his perspective of how that should be enacted was different than Stalin's. Stalin believed this all comes down to the whole socialism in one state or international socialism, right? That Trotsky was a big believer that we should be funding international socialist movements. We should be taking the fight to the capitalists, right? That we should have a permanent revolution where we're constantly funding organizations internationally so that they can rise up and coup their own countries and have revolutions internally and overthrow. And that wasn't Stalin's perspective. Stalin's perspective was socialism in one state. And I think what the Trotskyists would say is, well, look what the result of that was. They experienced World War II, the largest invasion by the Nazis, right? That we should have taken the fight to them. And so, again, that you're getting into the kind of the fan fiction of it all, right? What was that a wise decision? Would it have worked? right? Uh, 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 and so who's to say on that count? But my general thoughts about Stalin is, uh, I think that he was serious about communism. I think that he believed in what he said and what he did. I think that he defeated the Nazis. Uh, and I think that there are things to learn from Stalin. His land reforms, his desire to be rid of the kulaks. I mean, think about the way we talk about Lincoln, right? Lincoln freed the slaves. Well, Stalin freed people from the kulaks. Very similar sort of thing. So, Corey says, June says term limits are anti-democratic. If people want to vote for someone again, why shouldn't they be allowed to? Yeah, term limits weren't put in place in America until FDR. And then I tend to agree with you ideologically on that, except in practical sense, term limits do weaken attempts at authoritarianism, where once you gain power, you never let it go. The problem isn't authority, but how it's used. For sure, look at the U.S. We got presidential term limits because FDR was loved. Yeah, there we go, pushing us to the left. But term limits may have also prevented a third Bush term. So, wow, Monsieur Balls is going deep in the Twitch chat. I think Stalin would have built a successful revolution if it was not for the terrible sacrifices the West extracted from the Soviets in World War II. I tend to agree with that. Well, having looked into the famines closely, I pin that on the White Russian aristocratic landowners largely. I mean, I tend not to try to place blame on the cause of the famine. I honestly, if my perspective is that if God wants there to be a famine, so there shall be one. And you can sit there and try to find rationale and try to be like, we could have done this better, we could have done that better. But I don't like the idea of pinning blame. That's not what I think the discussion should be. I think the discussion should be what could we have done in order to have prevented this famine, perhaps. Like, that's more the best way to think about it. Because the truth is that, like, you don't actually have control of that. Like, if the universe goes famine time, then it's famine time, baby, and tough shit. Like, tough shit. And so the best way to look back on this sort of stuff is not by saying this person did this and they are wrong and they're the ones as if we can take them and put them in jail or something. Like, it's about just trying to alleviate it the best that you can, so that when these circumstances occur, you're in the best position to deal with them. I think that's sort of how I think about them. Like, do I think the Russians did some things incorrectly? Yeah, I do. I think that they did some things incorrectly, and that they could have done better. And do you know why I believe that? Because the Russians themselves said that. Because the Russians themselves said, yeah, we did some things, and it caused problems. Like, was it the cause of the famine and the reason why it occurred? No. The universe is the reason why it happened. But there are things they could have done better. But the truth is that they weren't sitting there thinking to themselves, we got to be careful about a famine. We got to be careful about a famine. We got to be careful on a famine, right? It's just one of those things that sort of comes up, and they all just go, oh, Jesus. Oh, man, a famine. Holy cow. Yeah, a backwards agrarian economy into an industrial society. Yeah. Post-World War II, Stalin had a stroke. He got a bit mad. Blood starvation to the brain. Lenin should have had the balls to kill all the aristocratic landowners much earlier. I mean, yeah, this is what I'm talking about when it comes to fan fiction, right? Like, it's a very bold thing to do. Like, when Stalin said that he was going to go after the kulaks and do the land reforms, people were shocked. It was a very shocking thing to proclaim. But he wrote a treatise on it, and he defended it, and people went along with it. Yeah, the Soviets were not equipped to modernize agriculture production. That was a mess. Yeah. Like, I mean, civilization building, it's always a mess, right? But this is one of the things that I've tend to see happen a lot with a lot of the civilization building conversations that occur. Like it's really easy when a culture and when a country is building something, it's really easy to point at the stuff that fails and say, aha, that failed. It doesn't work. You see this a lot in the conversation with China, that there you can find, like, China is building thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of miles and meters and cubits and tons and piles of infrastructure. Over the last 20 years, they've built like 600,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. They're just building. They're just building. You can see videos of them basically just building roads in a day and building a building in a day and just like they're just building constantly. Well, if you're going to be building that much, you're going to experience failure. There's going to be things that happen. It's just going to happen. Even if everybody involved in the process of creating all of this infrastructure was 100% following the rules and doing everything they were told and listening to what they were doing, and no one was skimming everything, and everything was being done completely to code 100% of the time, you would still experience a percentage of failure. You absolutely would. And if while that's going on, all you do is take a picture of the failure and then put it up and say, aha, the whole project is failing because this one road fell over. You can do that if you want, right? But the truth is that what you're actually doing is you're taking a look at a culture that's actually building something as opposed to a culture that builds nothing. And you're saying, aha, the people who are building something are experiencing minor setbacks while doing something. Well, guess what? That's called creation. That's called building. That's what happens. Anytime anything gets created at any time, at any moment, something breaks. Something falls over, something goes wrong. That's how we literally have a law for that. It's called Murphy's Law, right? Anything that can go wrong will. Well, guess what? We still do it anyway because then we build stuff and we get stuff done, right? So it's really rich to me when a culture that builds nothing, does nothing, and is worthless critiques a culture that's actually building something because the process of creation looks messy. Like, fuck off. Start building something yourself. Literally Elon Musk shoots a rocket into space that blows up and everybody goes like, that was supposed to happen. That rocket was supposed to blow up. Yeah, that rocket was supposed to blow up. It was totally normal. That doesn't mean it was a failure. It was supposed to blow up. That's right. It's all part of the process. Rockets blowing up. The Soviets, China internally is divided by huge geographical barriers. They have just really united China into a holistic entity through monumental civil engineering projects. Yeah, and they're pretty aware of it. Like, people who study Chinese history know pretty cleanly that China has fallen apart several times, right? They have whole dynasties, right? You have whole dynastic periods that fall into warlordism for a period of time, and then arise into a new dynastic period. It's happened quite a bit through Chinese history, and so the current Chinese ruling class, the communists, are sitting there being like, how do we avoid that? How do we make it so that this country is not going to fall apart again? And one of the ways that you do that is through unifying projects. Right? And China's very wise in this regard. Unifying projects is the way that you bind a culture together. And a big reason, a big sign, early on today, somebody was asking me, why do I say that I see that the West is in decline? It's because the West doesn't have any unifying projects. There is no unifying project in the West. That the last unifying project that actually came through Western civilization was universal health care across Europe and Canada. Never happened in America. And there was a moment where there was sort of a push for it, but now it's fallen apart and it's not happening again. And so there's no unifying projects that are occurring. Advil Plus. Would you live there, though? I don't see any reason why I wouldn't. There are a couple of problems, right? There's a couple of problems, Advil Plus, with the like. This is just a rephrasing of, if you love communism so much, why don't you go live there, right? And you can think of a couple of reasons why that wouldn't be the case, right? I don't know anybody there. I don't have a job there. I don't have any ties there. I don't know the language. I don't have any of the currency. Right? These pretty obvious, straightforward reasons why I don't live there. But the real reason why I don't move to these countries is because I don't think like an individualist the way that other capitalists do. Right? Like the other capitalists, I don't see that I want to abandon my people in their time of need. Yeah, Corey, so much of the chat gets filtered. I actually have it on live chat because that gives us the most. I could filter it even more, though, if I wanted to. I don't want to, though. I honestly think that it filters it too much. Like and the filter's gotten worse. It's gotten stronger. It doesn't really want us to be talking to each other. Finance capital, whose legitimate function is to facilitate large material projects, has become toxic and parasitic market speculation fund. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. You know what I really want to do, guys? I haven't done this in such a long time, and I'm in the mood for it. I want to do a China walk around video. China walk around. Somebody said, why don't you move to China? And I'm like, you know what, man? I love these China walk around videos. I feel like I should go visit China. If I ever get enough money and I ever get enough kind of thing, I'm absolutely going to go visit China. No, we got an ad. So you know what? While the ad's happening, I'm going to go use the washroom. That's what's going to happen. All right. And we are back. I love looking at these China walk around videos when I get talking about China. Just because it's like, this isn't the best one to illustrate the point, but I do think that it's good for people to actually see the place and to see the place that we're actually discussing. Because I think that people create like a very Big Brother-ish, kind of very sterilized, almost Sin City. Well, Baldy McNosehair comes in with a $10 donation. Thank you, sir. Saw this clip, CP24 saying, 3 in 4 Canadians say higher immigration is worsening during housing crisis. I think it's a load of BS. It's our government in the pocket of corporations. I mean, it is factually true that immigration levels are higher than they have been. That's just factually the case. I do think that people's attention is being drawn to it by corporate power. That's what I think is actually happening. That people's attention is being drawn to it. And so like there's this phenomenon, I forget what the name of this phenomenon is, but it's actually like a named psychological phenomenon where if you don't have if you're not thinking about something, right? So like if you never think about your shoes, right? If you never think about your shoes, then you don't really notice what shoes people are wearing. But if you buy yourself a pair of Nikes and you're really like, Nikes are awesome and I have a pair of Nikes, then everywhere you go, you see Nikes, right? And so all of a sudden you can be like, oh man, everyone's wearing Nikes. Nikes are so everywhere. Whereas before you would have just been like, well, I don't know, nor do I care, right? I guess you might say. So what we have done as a people and what the corporate power structure has done is they've put immigration at the top of our mind by jamming it in our faces. And so now we walk around and we see it wherever we go, when it was always this way, right? It's especially like in Toronto, like every like Toronto is like a complete rainbow array. It's got every ethnicity everywhere all the time, right? And so to get caught in this like, oh, immigrants are everywhere now. Oh my God, look. Well, yeah, they probably always were. You're just noticing it now because the corporate power structure is drawing your attention to it more than ever before. That said, it is actually factually the truth that the Trudeau administration is raising immigration rates. And they're doing that because the population is in decline. But what nobody actually talks about and nobody brings up is that immigration levels are also up, right? That immigration levels are up, and that's what the fascists will always point at. They're like, the immigration levels are up. We need to get these people to shut down the border. All kinds of stuff. Well, so are immigration levels. That Canadians are leaving Canada, and so are the recent immigrants. That recent immigrants come in, they realize that Canada's full of shit, and that there's no prosperity here, and they turn around and go back to their home. And just treat it like an adventure, basically. And so it's all disingenuous lying bullshit, right? We're not being honest in the conversation, because guess what? Capitalists scapegoat immigrants so that we won't come after them. And that's the truth. As long as you can keep people going after immigrants, that's an immigrant, we gotta go after the immigrant, they're taking our jobs, right? Well, how about the capitalists who are actually causing the problems in the first place? No? Not interested? Corey, you actually asked an interesting question here. On the topic of moving to other countries and other countries doing well, what are your thoughts on the Scandinavian countries and their current implementation of socialism? Or perhaps more accurately, social-minded capitalism? Real good question, Corey. That's actually a real good question. Because I get a lot of people who come in here, including people from the Netherlands and from Denmark, who say, but we have a socially minded capitalism. Can't we just do that? And why don't you do you support that idea? Why don't you just try to fight for that? Right? So this is essentially the idea that we reformed capitalism. You should be able to reform capitalism too. So the reason why the Scandinavian countries reformed their capitalist systems to be a more socially minded capitalism is because of the looming threat of communist revolution. That's how they got to be that way. That there were legitimate communist movements in Finland and in Denmark and in these countries that were basically saying, we should get rid of you capitalists like they did in Russia, right? You know, the country that's right over there, that's literally right next door. We should 100% just do that and be rid of you. And the capitalists went, well, no, come on. We don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. How about we make things a little bit easier for you? You want a longer week? You want less work out? You want health care? Oh, yeah, social benefits. Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Yeah, he'll raise our taxes. Absolutely. Just we keep the means of production. Right? It's the same thing with like FDR and the New Deal, right? That there were communists standing outside their door calling for revolution, and so that they knew they had to do something, or else people were going to come in and remove them from power, and that they were going to lose the means of production. That's what it's always about, is the means of production. And so when faced with the idea of legitimate revolution, the capitalists will begin concessions, right? Which is what they did and what they do. And so what you end up with is a country that is capitalist but has this socialist element to it. And my statement has always been, good for you, glad that you're enjoying that. The capitalists will strip that away as soon as they can. As soon as you don't have people coming out into the streets, as soon as you have a compliant population, as soon as you have a population that's not willing to fight for these things anymore, the capitalists will elect people to strip those away from you. And you can see that actually happening in the Netherlands now. That you have a far-right leadership being elected into power today. Not literally today, but soon. And what do you think they're going to do? You think they're not going to start privatizing? You think that they're not going to start moving in that direction? Right? So capitalism will only concede power into what we call a social democracy, or a social capitalism, if you prefer, under the threat of revolution. And once that threat of revolution is no longer present, they will begin stripping those social reforms away. And you can see that has happened in America. That's exactly what has happened across America. And so expect to see that throughout the Scandinavian countries. I expect to see that in my lifetime, that those social benefits will be stripped away, and that the Scandinavian people are going to have to fight. They're going to have to take to the streets, and they're going to have to fight for it, and they're going to have to get rid of their own far-right elements. And, of course, my feeling is that if you're going to take to the streets and you're going to fight in the manner that we're discussing, don't fight for concessions. Fight to be rid of the capitalists. Fight for the whole pie. I don't understand why you're fighting for crumbs. I don't know why you're organizing and getting into the streets for crumbs. Fight for the whole pie. Get rid of the capitalists. Hyper-capitalist Anglo economies are a massive flop now. Well, I mean, they shipped all their, like, historians are, I know I say this all the time, and I'm going to continue saying it, the Chinese Communist Party, the Communist Party of China, literally in their ideology and in their idea, contains the phrase, seize the means of production. These are people who understand intrinsically that power rests within the means of production, and that their goal is to seize the means of production and to build industrial and productive capacity. And America traded the means of production within its own borders to that country in exchange for stuff, for just like, in exchange for the goods that production created. Right? And so now we're seeing where the actual power of a society actually lies. And it actually lies in its productive capacity. That it doesn't lie within its financiers. It doesn't lie within its investors. It doesn't even really lie within its military. It lies within its productive capacity. And so China is now getting to a place where it's able to flex its muscles a little bit and operate on the world stage. And America is starting to wake up to the fact that, oh shit, we gave them the means of production. We gave a country that had a motto, seize the means of production, and we gave it to them so that they could make our stuff for us while we did nothing. And now they're no longer accepting our little pieces of paper for the goods that the means of production produce. And wait a minute, they're not using their productive capacity in order to enrich themselves at the expense of the underclass, like we were expecting. They're actually improving the quality of life for their own citizens. They're building infrastructure. They're building social systems. They're actually helping their own society, and they're lifting people out of poverty. We didn't expect them to do that. We thought they were capitalists now. And now the capitalists are panicking, right? The capitalists are panicking because they can't get a free ride from the global south anymore. They can't get a free ride from China and Southeast Asia. They can't get a free ride from Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, or Korea anymore. Even countries in Africa are beginning to throw off the colonial shackles. South America and Latin America is starting to move in that direction too, with the exception of places like Argentina that have just gone full hyper-capitalist. And nobody's going to accept their dumb little dollars anymore. And it looks like America doesn't know what to do about it. That's the best part. That the only thing that America can actually do and should do, if it actually cared about its own citizens, which it doesn't, but if it did, well, what it would do is it would begin massive investments in jobs programs in order to rebuild manufacturing, in order to rebuild its own industrial productive capacity, in order to build its own internal productive capacity, right? So that it could actually create something that the rest of the world would actually want. And if they started that process now, if they did that today, and they began that process now, in 100 years, they might be able to catch up. But the truth is that China is so far ahead in this game that by the time America caught up to where China is now in terms of productive capacity and manufacturing, China's going to be boom, boom, boom. Like, some crazy shit is going to happen in the world because of all of this. And America, it looks like they don't know what to do. It looks like they are just a deer in the headlights, just stuck. And they don't know how to proceed. And I think a big reason why they don't know how to proceed is because they view capitalism as a religious orthodoxy and not as a science. Because if you actually view capitalism as a science, you're a Marxist. And they don't read Marx. And they refuse to acknowledge Marx. They don't pay attention to Marx. They prefer their religious orthodoxy. And their religious orthodoxy tells them profits are the most important thing. Worship money. Your personal success matters more than the success of your community. Worship the self. And if you focus on those two things, then the free market will decide. Worship chaos. And that's essentially the religious ideology of the West, is the capitalist death cult. Because the ultimate result of all of this, the worship of money and the self and chaos, is the destruction of the species through climate change. And I just don't think the rest of the world is going to be, like, nice to us about it. You know? Especially when climate change really starts happening. Like, really some serious shit starts happening. When some serious shit starts happening, I don't see many countries looking at America and being like, it's okay, America. Half our country is underwater now. It's okay. We're absolutely sympathetic to you and your cause as your citizens actively fund climate change denialism. Yet Scandinavian countries are exploiting the third world countries. Yet the largest landowner in Mozambique is a Norwegian company called Grupo Modal. Yet that's the other problem with what's going to happen to Europe. So much of Europe's economy is based on the colonial period, and there's a lot of these African countries that are just like, yeah, not interested in that anymore. We're just going to get rid of that. What's France going to do? Like, what's France going to do if all of the countries that they exploit in Africa basically just say, yeah, we're good. We're not going to send you free shit anymore, France. What's going to happen to France? Like, what are they going to do? Corey says the problem with trying to push for reindustrialization in the U.S. right now, with climate change and our efforts to fight it, we are caught between a rock and a hard place. If we had the clean energy needed, we could build clean factories, but we don't. And so we are 2 steps behind. If you ask me, yeah, we're definitely behind. If you ask me, what's going to actually happen is we're going to have this fascist period, and the fascists are going to panic, and they're going to make a series of bad decisions very quickly. That's what I always, that's how I've come to describe these people, that they're going to make a series of bad decisions very quickly. Because they're going to be confronted with reality. That reality is going to come and just them right in the face. They're going to have to, like, round people up, and they're going to have to do some serious shit because of their stupidness, basically. And then now that reality is right in front of them and they can't deny the existence of reality, They'll make the decision, and that decision is going to be nuclear. They're going to build a bunch of nuclear, is what they're going to do. They're just going to slap up a bunch of nuclear shit, and yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I am like theoretically, I have been debating about nuclear for my entire life. And I kind of am in that position where I sort of see all sides, and I feel like I am now like 55% pro-nuclear. I think that if we had have been pursuing nuclear 20 years ago, we'd actually be kind of sitting pretty. We'd be okay right now. But that's sort of out the window. I think we're gonna get definitely blindsided with some shit. So I expect that it's going to be the fascists that'll just slap up a bunch of nuclear plants with all of the shit that comes along with that, right? Yeah, I actually wouldn't mind having like a more robust conversation about nuclear, because I think that I feel like all of the negative aspects of nuclear that get brought forward, I have essentially kind of come to basically saying, yeah, okay, I'll bite that bullet. It's not carbon in the atmosphere. That's essentially where I'm at now. That if you are going to sit there and insist that we need to be this consumption-based society, and you're willing to die on that hill, like Americans seem to be, then like what's some alternatives? I would love to hear some alternatives. Like, you guys all know what my position is, right? And it's the position I advocate for, and it's the position that I talk about. The position that I talk about is that we need to consume less. That we need to do less. We need to pollute less. We need to produce less. We need to do less. And we need to let the earth heal itself. That's been my position since the start, and it'll stay my position. But if people are going to actually not do that, and if the position is not going to be, hey, just chill out, right? Just chill out, bro. If that's not what it's going to be, then nuclear seems to be where people are going to land. And when they start doing it, like, given the dramatic nature of the things that are coming, I think that when they start pursuing nuclear in big, serious ways, like when they start mass producing nuclear, most people will go along with it. I just think that most of us will be so exhausted, and most of us will be so depleted, and most of us will be so tired of the anti climate change movement that we'll just be happy to see that anything has happened. You know, we'll just be sitting here being like, "Oh, good, something." Is it something that I'm happy about? No, but it's still something. And I think that's just how it's going to go, right? Yeah, build free public transport infrastructure, ban cars. Yeah, these are tax the fuck out of meat. Yeah, these are things that we could do. But there's a bunch of stuff that we could do, right? Like, that's the part about it that's so funny, is that it's like there are things to be done, you know? It's not going to be like one thing and we're all good. Like, even my position that says just consume less and pollute less, right? Even I have to be like, yeah, but like we still have to produce food, right? We're not going to suddenly stop producing food, and that's going to require the burning of fossil fuels. But like, you know what we can do right away? We can ban private jets right away. Like, we know that it's the richest people that are producing the most pollution. Those are the people who we should ground. We should literally say to Jeff Bezos, Taylor Swift, Bill Gates, all of these guys, yeah, no more of your jetting around. Tough shit. You're grounded. And if they refuse, we jail them. Like, I'm so over this. Like, we know who's producing the pollution. We know who's consuming. We know who's doing it. They have names and they have addresses. We know where they live. We could very simply say, if we wanted to reduce our emissions dramatically, we would say to these people, stop polluting. It's over now. Like, too bad. Right? And if they refused, okay, well, you don't need to be rich. Like, you don't need to have these assets. You don't need to have the freedom to do these things. Like, I'm so over this idea that we can't incarcerate these people. Like, I said this to somebody out in the world, and they were acting like, oh my God, you want to incarcerate people for crimes? Oh my goodness, jailing people who are criminals? Like, yes. Like, it's so wild to me that if someone steals a loaf of bread, people are like, jail him! Put him in prison until he dies! No parole! But if somebody literally spreads toxic waste into a city, people are like, well, a minor fine will do. That will disincentivize him. Jail. Jail. I don't get this. Jail. Put them in jail. Yeah, lock up bankers. They will soon start behaving. One hopes. Yeah, saw a stat. The top 1% is accountable for more carbon emission than the bottom 60%. Yeah. Like, we know. Like, we know who's doing the producing. Like, we know. Right? Instead of planting trees, we should plant bamboo. Why bamboo, June? What's got you convinced on bamboo? I mean, I'm not... At this point, there's, like, no bad ideas. Like, anything counts at this stage in the game. Yeah, the West is run by the most corrupt. Yeah, we're not gonna, like, this is the thing. Like, it's all nice and good to say, like, jail them, lock them up, because that's not gonna happen. Like, we know it's not gonna happen until there's, like, 1 million people in the streets threatening a general revolution, right? Like, these sorts of conversations about jail them is not a real thing. It's not gonna happen, right? Like, this is why we need to be legitimately organizing along revolutionary lines. Like, straight up, unabashedly, unapologetically. Like, one of the things I've got some time off coming up here, and one of the things that I'm really going to be pursuing is I'm going to try to set up a monthly meetup so that people can come together locally and we can begin organizing a local organization that is explicitly revolutionary, not reformist, not negotiation, not let's talk to the capitalists. Literally, capitalists go bye-bye. They are not part of the conversation anymore. That's the revolutionary nature of the thing. And if people walk in the door and say, oh, we should do concession, get out of here. Fuck off. Go make your own little club. Go away. This is a revolutionary party. We are a revolutionary organization. Bamboo is the fastest growing plant on Earth, whereas trees can take decades, centuries, sometimes millennia. One species of bamboo can grow up to 2.91 feet per day. But is bamboo, like, is it a good carbon sink? Yes, exactly, Mikhail. That's exactly my question. Can bamboo sequester carbon efficiently? That's a much nicer way of saying it, Mikhail, than I did. You're sitting there being like, can bamboo sequester carbon efficiently? And I'm like, does carbon good? Good carbon? Carbon. Yeah, I'm also curious about that as well. You know what, man? I'm telling you guys. Like, I'm really telling you guys, okay? Like, the shit that's gonna start happening, all of these ideas that your, like, brain starts to go, like, well, that would be a solution for here, but here's a problem that creates. That part of your brain that tries to find the problem with a solution is gonna shut off. That's gonna be great. The shit that is about to happen, people are gonna stand up and say, this is a solution, and you're gonna go, do it. You're just going to be so fucking exhausted with this shit. You're going to be so tired with this kind of shit. You're going to be so over it. You're just going to be so, like, rolling your eyes at the people who are standing up being like, this is a problem with that solution. You're just going to be like, I don't care. We'll deal with that problem. Because the shit that's coming from climate change is going to be so dramatic that the problem that they put forward about the solution is going to seem like baby talk. You're just going to be like, I don't care. Well, if you plant the bamboo in a place, it will be considered an invasive species, and it could dislocate certain wildlife and fauna. And you're going to be like, we just watched all the canola fields in Manitoba ignite. Plant them. Like, I'm already there, honestly. Like, if Doug Ford stood up today and said, we're going to do a nuclear power plant in the middle of Toronto, I'd be like, great. And he would put it right in the middle of Toronto too. That's exactly how he'd work. He would not put it like out in the boonies somewhere or something. He'd literally put it in like a major epicenter. Yeah, if we can't dislocate major populations, why even bother doing it? I have to check, but yeah, I saw that bamboo is great for carbon. Less carbon per tree, but more per square mile because it can be so dense. Let's do it. Let's just fucking do it. Let's just get all of this bamboo. Let's turn our whole world into a bamboo world. Bamboo world. Lou writes, can it grow on melted tundra sludge? Realistically, we need to put sulfur back into shipping fuels at this point. Why? What does that do? What does putting sulfur back into shipping fuels do? I'm not saying no. China looking like Blade Runner with clean streets. Yeah, this does have a Blade Runner kind of feel. This is just one of their cities. Which one is this? This is Chongqing or Chongqing. I'm mispronouncing it, of course, but the one of the things that I really love about what China has done is they went through a huge period of time where they were building cities, literally building entire cities in the middle of nowhere. There's an old Vice documentary where they talk about China's ghost cities, right? And of course, China is doing this for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is that they're expecting a big population increase, and they have experienced a population increase, but the one-child policy really helped that out a lot. And then the second, they're also being like, yeah, have you noticed how all of our cities are on the coast, and climate change is coming? So we're going to have to like relocate pretty major populations. Like we're going to have to relocate huge population bases. And so we're just going to have those cities already built. And so when climate change starts to happen and when the lowland of China starts to experience what's going to happen because of the increased water levels, right? It's going to dislocate lots of people. And so they're going to have infrastructure all ready to go. And all of the Westerners who are going, ho, China built a bunch of empty cities. They're just gaming the financial blah, blah, blah. Suddenly all these people will just move into new apartments ready for them, already built, right? And Westerners will be like, oh, I guess that worked out. Yeah, the free market. Meanwhile, China will be like, no, dude, we have planning documents. Like we see what was going on. We here in China believe in a concept called planning. I know that that's a foreign idea in America, but we like to plan for things. Yeah, planned economy and development. Who knew? Like, it's so interesting seeing, like, Western China watchers, even Western China watchers that are relatively sympathetic to China. It's really interesting to see that it's so obvious that there isn't an acceptance of this idea that China plans, like that we just don't accept it as a precept. We don't understand it as a concept. That we here in the West believe in the free market. We believe that the market will decide, and that chaos will reign, and that the invisible hand of the market will just make things happen. And so often people criticize China or talk about the future of China. And I'm reading their criticism and I'm reading what they're writing. And I'm literally like, you guys think money is more important than infrastructure. You guys literally think that the dollars and cents aspect of it is the point, and not the bridge, right? Not the building, not the technology, not the research, the money. It's so obvious that that's the case. That if it doesn't enrich some investor somewhere, then it's not worth doing. And even people who are extremely sympathetic to China, who are still capitalists, have this mindset and have this worldview. So they can literally watch cities being erected, and they can watch in major infrastructure projects being completed. And they're just like, yeah, but who got rich? Where'd the money go? Who's the rich investor that I can talk about? There isn't one? Well, this is a failure, clearly. How's China going to sustain this? As if their system is at all sustainable. Where's their Elon Musk? I'm not seeing an Elon Musk here. It's just, it's interesting to see how the West has convinced itself that in spite of all evidence, its economic system is the one that works the best. And meanwhile, China is literally just sitting there being like, yeah, what we do is we look at our economy and we look at our society, and then we plan and do a projection into the future for what we would like that society to look like in 100 years. And every 5 years, we come together and we sort of say, is it working? And we redress and we fix and we finesse and we do this thing called planning. And if we decide it's not working, we stop doing it. And because of China's population base, what's really interesting about China, if you ask me, is that because of its population base, it can run experiments. You can literally take a city block in a Chinese city and run an economic experiment there. And because there's like 100 million people or 10 million people living there, right? 100 million people in a city maybe. Because you've got a huge sample of people in an area, you can run an economic model there, and if it works, you can spread it out, and if it fucks up, you can stop doing it. So it allows them to be much more experimental, which I really, really love it. Zane 2x says, for the first time chat, what do you think about the British Empire colonizing Canada again? What? What are you talking about, bro? The British Empire colonizing Canada again? First of all, there is no British Empire. The British Empire died. It became the American Empire, and it kind of became a banking system. But it's not, there's no British Empire. That doesn't exist. And so, I mean, I would ostensibly be against it if the British Empire did exist. Like, if suddenly there was like a snap and here was the British Empire again and it was coming and it was colonizing Canada, yeah, fuck them. Don't. I am anti-imperialist. Not a big fan of the British Empire. Not a big fan of empire in general. Right? I don't like the idea that there would be a military that would sweep through and start kicking in doors and shit. And yeah, Canada is still a colony in many ways. Like, Canada is a vassal state to the United States. That's its relationship. What about if the USSR wanted to colonize Canada, or maybe turn Canada into a Soviet republic? Well, the USSR wouldn't want to colonize Canada in the first place. But having Canada join the Soviet Republic is a different conversation. Right? That if you actually look at the world not from the traditional map view, but from the Arctic Pole, a union between Canada and Russia makes a lot of sense. Right? If you take a look at the here, hold on, let's see if I can find it. Map from the North Pole. If you look at the world map from the position of the North Pole, can I do it from Google Earth? That'd be great. Because we traditionally take it on a very kind of lateral, on a very one kind of basis, but the Earth is actually a three-dimensional object. And if you actually look at it from that perspective, Russia goes like this, and then Canada comes down the other side, right? And we're actually very close to one another that way. We're also quite close to one another. If it wasn't for Alaska, we would literally have like this very close. Sure. Yeah, this will do it. This will do it. Here we go. So here's Russia, right? And then you just go, there's the North Pole, and there's Canada, right? We have this like land bridge right here. You need to go away. That like Russia and Canada are actually ridiculously close to one another. And so an agreement or a June, would you vote for Zombie Nixon? You're goddamn right I would. Haroo. Hey, Nixon was the last liberal president. So I feel like voting for Zombie Nixon would be pushing America to the left. Yeah, this is I love this perspective. Like, it straight up would put like Alaska in this really weird situation. And that would be the reason why it wouldn't happen, is because of Alaska. But like the connection right here to here, click, real easy, click. There's so many like trade routes that could exist. There's so many ways that we could communicate with one another, right? Touch base, even around this way, right? So like, I feel like an alliance between Russia and Canada could be beneficial for both parties. The trouble with that idea is that Canada has the United States right fucking there. Right fucking there, right? So, like, Russia would be like, oh, hello. Hello there, little Canadian man. Would you like to be part of the great Soviet Union? And if Canada was like, oh, sure, bud, that sounds real great, United States would be like, I will destroy you and everything you know. I will come up from the border and consume. And so Canada's like, oh no, okay, bud, that's great, eh? Thanks for the offer, though. Yeah, I think we're gonna just be happy. We're here being America's hat. That's okay. I think they have a legitimate claim to Alaska. Nixon threatened to send rich kids to Vietnam. That put a stop to the war. Yeah, that'll do it. I knew it, Conton. I knew it. I didn't do the bamboozled joke just for you, because I knew that you were sitting there being like, bamboozled. Bamboozled. It's right there. Why is nobody saying it? I know. I'll wait for the perfect opportunity and then I'll strike. Well, you did it. God bless your heart. God bless your heart, Conton. We cleaned up maritime fuels in 2020 and lost our smog sun umbrella. Is that good? I'm going to say that that's a good thing. Dude, the Sahara Desert's just wild to me. Like, this is a desert. A desert as large as like several countries. And it just goes, it's like a band of a desert. It's just this huge banded desert. It's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway. Yeah, anyway, I think that we are reaching the end of this one, guys. This might be a good place to stop. I didn't read any of the articles I was planning to read. Because honestly, like, just look at these articles. Death and despair of suicides in the U.S. at historic levels. Ooh. Well, that's a downer. 3 climate impacts the U.S. will see if warming goes beyond 1.5 degrees. The U.S. will heat up even faster. Huh? Isn't this great? Isn't it great that the heat death of the planet is just definitely coming? Rainfall intensifies. Well, that's nice. So not only is it going to be hot, it's going to be intense rain. And then extreme heat gets worse, meaning more hot days and fewer cold ones. The wildfires are going to be the best. That's what I'm here for, man. The wildfires. Those are going to be the greatest. Just absolutely roasting this place. As expected, Israeli defense minister says all people who support Hamas should die. These guys aren't Nazis at all. No Nazism here. Nothing to see here, you guys. Normal country. Just being totally normal. And of course, Hamas invites Elon Musk to Gaza to witness massacres and destruction. I think this is a great place. I'm just going to end it. We're good. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being. Walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.